You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
Welcome to the exciting world of the movies.
Hello, retro movie lovers, and welcome back to the Movie Graveyard. We got another real special here for you tonight. Another great topic brought up by our longtime fellow movie gravedigger, Trev. Trev, how you doing? Welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I'm happy to be back, and I'm excited that you took me up on this offer for this episode. I have to say, you and I have done a lot of pretty cool topics, some good movies. This might be the one I've been looking forward to the most ever since I kind of first thought of this idea. I've been really excited to dive into this.
I know, we've probably been this has kind of been on the drawing board, so to speak, for at least 6 months, and we had other ones that we worked through, and this was kind of the last one to get through. And it's kind of worth the wait for me because it was nice to, step back into these films and revisit this. And we are talking about the great scream queens of the, really all through the 80s, but I'd say they definitely hit their heyday in the late 80s, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This trilogy of Scream Queens that we're talking about today, I think I would say probably around 85, 86 is when people started to really pay attention to them. And I'd say they run up into about the mid-90s, right? When you say that basically their decade is 85 to 95, I'd say.
Yeah, because, we'll get to it later, but when we watched that doc... Oh, somebody just had a terrible fall. You okay, Trev?
Yeah.
Okay. That was scary sounding. All of a sudden, I thought I was in one of those Blumhouse Skype things, when it's four groups or four friends on a call, and they
get Jason Blum on the phone. We can sell this. I know we can.
We can. They start getting picked off one by one.
Two horror fans talking about Scream Queens online when suddenly.
Yeah, so we're talking about the great Michelle Bauer, the great Linnea Quigley, and the great Brinke Stevens. But I agree with you. If you look at either their IMDb or just you look at that documentary that we watched, when they showed the little clips in the documentary, you can tell the kind of quote unquote good movies they're in. It seemed like they really kind of died off around 95-ish, and then the ones that they're in after that were very much the less polished home video, homemade looking films. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to start by asking you, Go, and then I can talk about it briefly. But when do you remember, were you aware of all three of them as a kid, growing up in this era? Was there one that was your favorite even back then? Or, were you clocking this as an idea of these three Scream Queens?
Yeah, it's kind of, not really. I knew Scream Queen, the concept existed because Linnea Quigley was pretty much, Linnea Quigley was the one I was the most familiar with. And I'd say for me, it came through a combination of the magazines I used to read, Fangoria. Right. I had a handful of Famous Monsters of Filmlands, the kind of weird run that they had in the 80s. And I remember in those, I'd say pretty much my awareness didn't start until Return of the Living Dead. And I would say probably my next big dose of Linnea Quigley came with a few years later with the Night of the Demons. And then around, I would say, Night of the Demons on, she was very much, because I was a monthly Fangoria reader, and she was always popping up in that. They were always covering her projects, her movies, as well as she would kind of pop up in things that were about Steve Johnson, who she was married to at the time. Yep. And Brinke Stevens, for the longest time, I knew the name, and I didn't really see her films. And it wasn't really, I would say, really till the 90s. And even the early 2000s when I was working at a video store, when I was working at a video store between 2002 and 2004, the Linnea Quigley, they were the crappy low budget ones, but the Linnea Quigley and Brinke Stevens movies were coming in nonstop, literally nonstop still. And the one that was totally missed my radar completely was Michelle Bauer. And it's I can't believe it because she's so awesome. It wasn't until maybe 6 months ago when I watched for the first time ever Sorority Babes and the Slimeball, Bowl-O-Rama, and it was one of those things where I don't know what was up. I wasn't on the radar as much as you think I would, because the mom and pops video stores that were in walking distance of my house, they didn't be it was literally because they were small places. They didn't have the giant like exploitation. You know, they would have a few, but like, yeah, like the Scream Queens weren't really lining the shelves, you know, in the podunk town in Indiana I grew up in. So, so I always knew about it kind of like through cable, and like Sorority Babes I knew about, believe it or not, from going to my uncle's house, and we would watch like the previews for pay-per-view. And I remember the preview for Sorority Babes Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama was on nonstop on the previews for like maybe a year, but I never saw the movie because I never actually like saw it on the shelf at the video store. So like I would say, like, as much as I was all about the genre even as a kid and going to see movies theatrically and even seeing some obscure ones theatrically and also in video, yeah, man, I got a bum deal, dude. I didn't have any video stores that were really stocking these near me.
I mean, your story is kind of similar to mine, although I did have, like, right, I think I've told this story on this show before, and we should really actually talk about the video store thing just for a little bit here, because they represent such like that era, right? And like how much the Scream Queen thing is tied into the rise of video stores and vice versa. But just like you, Linnea Quigley was definitely the first one I clocked when I was younger, just because, like you said, she was the one getting the press, right? So if you were young and getting into horror films, you were seeing her get covered a lot in all those magazines you talked about. And just like you, I definitely knew the name Brinke Stevens, and I guess I knew she was a Scream Queen because she also got a little bit of mainstream attention. You know, you'd see her pop up on talk shows, and like on things like E! And stuff like that, and they would talk about her being like one of the big Scream Queens. But I don't know that I was seeing a lot of her movies. And exactly like you too, I don't think I had any concept of or any knowledge of Michelle Bauer. I definitely saw some movies she was in, but I didn't know that name or know like who she was until much later, when in that like post 2000 really big initial DVD boom, when I finally started to go back to this stuff and catch up in it on a retro way, and then realizing like, oh, okay, so that's who that one is, you know. But I also remember, because you were mentioning some of those magazines, you mentioned like Fangoria and stuff, and I think the two other ones that are important to mention are Cinefantastique, and then I believe, which was its sister publication, was actually a magazine called Scream Queens. Yeah. And I remember seeing that in stores all the time, looking at that. And that's where I think I even first heard that term and started to think of that as a concept and as an idea when I was younger. And then to that, like in my head, the two big Scream Queens were Linnea Quigley and Julie Strain, because I feel like Julie Strain was on every other cover of that magazine. But then as they actually made this point in the documentary we'll mention later, if you look at Julie Strain's filmography, she's really not much of a Scream Queen. It was very easy to put her on the covers of all those magazines, but she wasn't doing mostly horror. She was actually doing more sci-fi and kind of like the Andy Sidaris type action thrillers, whereas the three we're talking about really heavily dealt in horror. And then I remember being young, I don't know if you had this experience, because you were just saying that your video stores didn't get these movies. Mine did. I had, this is a story I feel like I probably told, but the cool little indie video store that was right down the road from my house, I could walk to it in about like 8 minutes or so. And as a latchkey kid, as I believe many 80s kids were, you know, I would go there like almost every day after school and just rent videos. And my mom did the cool thing where she put a note on our account that said I could rent R-rated movies, even though I was way too young. And I started like working my way through all the horror stuff. And I was really trying to catch up on more of like the really gory, crazy Italian horror and stuff that it felt like, ooh, I shouldn't be watching these. And some of the stuff that was like more cheesy and B, I think that was stuff I started to appreciate more later. But Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, for a long time, I thought it was like an outer space movie. Something about that name and like the cover, and like there's the cover is that like that painting of Linnea Quigley in her outfit, but there's something about the painting where it looks like a little bit more like, I don't know, kind of futuristic or something. And I think, and then she's got like the imp hand behind her, but I thought it was like an alien hand. And I just always had this assumption, maybe it was because there was so many other movies like that at the time, like Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity and all those other B movies with, you know, girls in space. I just thought like the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama must be some like intergalactic bowling tournament or something. And that's what I think I always thought it was until like you, I caught up with that movie like much later.
Yeah, and like unfortunately, like when we moved when I was like 11, I had a cable blind spot. So like we lived in the city, so I think we had cable from about the time from like around 82 or 83 to like 88 when we moved. And then yeah, from 88 all the way till 96, because where we lived there was like literally no cable company at all. And then there was the cable company that came a couple years later wasn't very good, so we never got it. And our neighbors had a lot of problems with it, like always losing the signal and shit. And it wasn't until actually DirecTV became like more affordable. And I remember 96 we got a satellite dish, and like I kind of got caught up on some stuff. I more the like I don't know what you would call them exactly, like they on the movie channels there, they were airing this shit late night, but it really wasn't like the era of that like Brink and Linnea were in. It was more like the shit that came later. Like the shot on like SVHS movies and stuff is what they were showing late night at that point.
Yeah, see, this is the big difference between us then, because I always had cable, like from a kid, like going on, we just always had cable in our house, and I was very informed at a young age from every weekend watching Monster Vision and USA Up All Night, and that's really where I think my, infatuation and love with these actresses and like this whole kind of movie started to come from, because it was watching those shows every weekend. And I remember, like USA Up All Night was on Friday and Saturday nights. The Friday version was the, Rhonda Shear version. I think it was Rhonda Shear on Fridays and Gilbert Gottfried on Saturdays. Yeah. And then on Saturdays it was great because you could flip back and forth between Up All Night and Monster Vision. You could just kill back and forth. And sometimes it would be like you'd just be trying to catch the host segments, not even the movies. But I saw so many of these movies back then. That's why I said, like, I was definitely seeing stuff with Michelle Bauer and Brinke Stevens and just not even realizing it, because I was watching some of these movies, but I was watching, obviously, the edited versions. But that speaks to this era, too, because they made a really good point in that documentary. I think it was the screenwriter Ken Hall who said it, where there's something about these movies and the movies that these three were making and these kind of this era, why people like us are so nostalgic for it, is that these cheap exploitation movies, which were clearly made to show off a lot of nudity and just crazy gore, they were well enough made and fun enough that even if you cut that stuff out, the movies were still entertaining to watch on regular cable. And that speaks to, I think, these filmmakers and then like how energetic and fun the performances are. And that's what was really missing from like the later stuff, I think, that follows in the 2000s, where you can't edit down some of the crap we get now and still have it be entertaining the same way.
I agree too. And it's just like, I was never, it's not like I ever, looked down on these movies when I was younger. Like I kind of knew they exist, but I didn't go out of my way to seek them out, or they weren't like super available to me anyway, like I was saying. So, but like I never really felt like I was missing out, because like for the longest time I thought Sorority Babes was actually a trauma film, because like the advertisements they had, the previews they had on pay-per-view, it looked like that. And like I was real familiar from before my whole cable blackout era. Like I caught a big dose actually of trauma in the early to mid 80s, like Toxic Avenger and all that shit. So it's like I knew those movies as a kid, and I probably watched, like, no shitting, I probably watched Toxic Avenger like 10 or 12 times, but it was kind of just like in my head, like they were like a lower whatever form, like just in terms of like, they weren't going to blow you away, as a kid. Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm kind of eager now to go back and see what I can track down through like Netflix, DVD, and all that kind of stuff, or just pick up copies as these things get re-released by things like Vinegar Syndrome and stuff. But like I'm kind of like into it more right now, believe it or not, than I was at any other point. Because like before, the era that these movies were made in, like, yeah, these movies are cool and like they were fun to watch on cable or whatever, rent them or whatever, but like they weren't like something I was going to actively go out of my way. And like now I am more drawn to it because there's really nothing else out there that's like it. Like I feel like right now these movies feel a lot more unique than they even did back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and then I remember Troma I feel like Troma had some kind of deal with Cinemax when I was growing up, because I feel like that's where I saw a lot of Troma stuff, and they would do like Troma nights, and I remember like having Lloyd Kaufman actually be on Cinemax introducing the films. But at least, that's a memory I have. You know how your memories get like mutilated over time, but I feel like that's such a case. But this is again where you were kind of missing out, because I think what I mentioned earlier about like the rise of the video stores, and this is true of cable as well. The reason these movies and these actresses became such a big deal and would get TV coverage, and you'd have Brinke Stevens and Linnea Quigley being featured on news shows as like the queens of the bees, right? Is because, and people need to remember, like maybe our younger listeners who didn't get to experience this in the 80s, and just basically the early 80s and going into the late 80s, both video stores and cable movie channels were brand new. And at this point, like, most of the big studios weren't putting their big catalog titles on cable or in video stores, because they were both like kind of untested markets, and these companies just had to like fill these things up however they could. So the video stores, their shelves were just full of like B movies. And then I remember the days when HBO and Cinemax was mostly like crap like this. You get like the big Hollywood movie would come on every night at like 8:00, and then during the day it was all like cheap exploitation B movie stuff, because that's just what was available to them. And so that's something that's kind of missing today too, where there was just, everybody who was watching movies was way more exposed to Trauma and Full Moon and all this stuff, because that's just what we were seeing. And that's why people of our generation are obsessed with movies like The Last Dragon and Big Trouble in Little China and Breakin', because these movies were just on constantly on cable.
And like that's a great point too, because like even though they never had the budgets or the advertising support that like even like a minor studio release we get, they had that thing of like they were plugging a hole at a time where like they did have equal exposure like on these channels. So it's like, and then also too the different movie channels had different agreements. So like I'd say pretty early on, like movie channels exploded. Like I don't really remember, like I think maybe HBO might have been the first or maybe something else, but I remember like pretty early on there was already HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, and the movie channel. And the way like, even though some of them are like kind of owned by the same companies now, I don't know if they were them, but like they would kind of have to split the distribution up. So it's like, for example, like you couldn't have like the same movie playing on 2 or 3 of the movie channels the same one. So they kind of had to like cycle through and take turns. And like I don't remember, I mean this is too far back, I don't remember like the exact studios that would like go to this channel or that channel, but it's like, yeah, so it's like there's a good chance probably a lot of these ones that we're talking about were always on cable. They probably were on like HBO for a long run, and then Cinemax for a long run, and then later like another one, you know what I mean? So it's like
it's funny because even beyond like the studios having the deals with them, I feel like I remember each movie channel kind of having its own singular identity a little bit too, right? Like HBO was definitely the more mainstream one, but also I think I always thought of HBO had mostly comedy, right? Especially during the day, they would show like a lot of comedies, and a lot of those would be like B-level comedies. I remember something like like Up the Creek would be on HBO like all the time, And then Cinemax, of course, always had more sci-fi, and then at night we all know it was Skinemax. Like that's just where you got all your softcore stuff that was very important for us growing up because we didn't have the internet. And then Showtime, I felt like had like more horror than like the other ones, and then the movie, or maybe Showtime was like more drama, and maybe Movie Channel was more horror because Movie Channel had Joe Bob's original show. But yeah, it just felt like I remember definitely a time where you felt like you kind of knew what you were getting every time you flipped to a different movie channel.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny you mentioned Joe Bob because like I don't know if this was just my perception, but I always felt like Movie Channel had like the reputation of really being like the third or fourth run one, and it wasn't until Joe Bob kind of like gave them the identity to where like people were like actively choosing the Movie Channel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, it is a fun time, and it's kind of like just the way you laid that out there is, it kind of reminds me of it didn't last very long, but the early days of streaming when Netflix was just catching on, and how it was like such a hodgepodge of stuff that was on there, and like how the video store era and the movie channel era kind of created these like cult hits. Like I remember the early days of streaming was like less on the cult stuff, but more on just the old stuff that people hadn't seen. Like I remember like a weird thing was like Adam 12 was like one of the main things like you could stream on Netflix, you know what I mean? Like so like yeah, like I think it definitely was and they talk about it in the documentary too, is the switch over from drive-ins to video stores. Like it definitely was like these type of films were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and it was just a glorious era, right? I mean, we're not saying anything that hasn't been talked about in 300 different horror documentaries and articles, over the last few years now. But I mean, the fun of going to a video store, like for me, was like I said, a daily or almost like every other day kind of experience. But I think everyone at least went on the weekends, and just that experience of walking through the aisles, and especially at this era, right, when it was mostly weird stuff you'd never heard of. And just the fun of these movies and the crazy box covers and just getting sucked in by strange titles and premises and and a hot chick on the front or whatever. And just that level of like discovery, right? And then you take that home and you had to watch it. This isn't the Netflix thing where you watch 5 minutes and go like, nah, I'll move on to the next thing. This was your movie for the night. So you would sit through the whole thing. And that was good too, because I think it forced, and I shouldn't say forced, but you would discover more stuff that I think you might give up on nowadays.
For sure. Like I can only imagine how great it was too for like the high school and college crowd, because like I remember like when I was in college, like this was when the video store had reached its peak and was completely mainstream. But like we would go with a couple buddies and pick out like 3 films, usually 2 to 3, and like you would just look for the weirdest shit you could get. Like I remember a group of 5 or 6 guys sitting down probably at like, I don't know, probably like 11:30 midnight on the weekend, and like we were trying to watch Shakes the Clown. And like, it seemed like about half of us were into it, and the other half kind of just like, okay, like halfway through, like I gotta go, I'm gonna go home, whatever, you know what I mean? And like I couldn't only imagine how fun it would have been to do that with a group of guys that age, like back in the day, 10, 12 years earlier, where you could like just go and load up on these type of movies. I think it'd be even more fun.
Yeah, it was great. Did you ever hook up the 2 VCRs and try to like dub videos that you rented from a store?
Actually, believe it or not, never did that. We did the thing where we kind of built up a library in the 80s of just taping stuff on like HBO or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like we did that, but no, never really caught on to the 2 VCRs. Well, first of all, we actually never had 2 VCRs, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Until like probably, I want to say the first like 2 VCR setup I had was probably when I got a VCR for my room, like, probably late 90s, a couple years before DVD came out. And I would start out making like music videos out of clips from stuff I had on tape. And then like I would kind of edit them together, and then I would like run it through again, and then like I hooked up a PlayStation 1 and played a CD, and I would like make my own music videos. And then later I used the 2 VCR method to edit together real crudely this cable access show that me and my buddy did for about a year. But yeah, I never did the copying films thing. Did you ever run into the copy protection shit? Like,
yeah, you would find some that you couldn't do, right? But that is my memory of having a VCR in my room, and I still remember the days of I'd go rent a movie, and then later that night when no one was using the TV downstairs, taking the VCR from my room downstairs, hooking it up, and like dubbing the tapes. And all that stuff that like nobody knows what we're talking about anymore, right? Like going and buying the blank tapes and getting the ones that in EP are 9 hours, but in SP were only 3 hours, and having to decide, do you want the better quality or do you want the more stuff on the tape?
Yeah.
I remember, when I was you as a fellow, I don't really watch wrestling anymore. I know you still do, but we both grew up with wrestling.
Yeah. And
especially I remember getting those like 9 hour ones and being like, I can either put one pay-per-view on this that looks really good, or I can have 3 pay-per-views on this, but they look like shit. To kind of like make that decision,
Yeah, and I have to say, like, we would do that most of all because my dad worked third shift, and obviously this is way before the days of DVR. So, like, we always had our shit in long played mode because he would, like, set the VCR timer to record a bunch of different things, overnight while he was at work, so he had something to watch, when he came home. And so, like, our shit was always in the long played mode. And it's like, it wasn't until years later when I like kind of started like looking back, like digging out some old tapes that we had, like recorded some old movies. I'm like, yeah, this looks really shitty. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Yeah, it's funny. And the worst was when I started collecting movies, like probably, I don't know, around 95, 96-ish. Like I got like the first 3 Freddy Krueger movies and stuff, and like they were like those budget, like I thought it was awesome because I could go to Kmart and buy a Nightmare on Elm Street for $8.99 on VHS. But then when you got it home and watched it, it was that thing where like they basically recorded them in like whatever long played mode just so they could use less tape, and like they look terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing we should talk about before diving into the individual movies is just the idea of a scream queen. This is again something that's been talked about a lot recently, but I guess we could talk about this in like an overall sense and then more specific to this era. But I mean, where do you fall in the concept? Because I know it's a surprisingly controversial term nowadays, like more so than I ever expected it to be. You have Barbara Crampton, who I love and who in recent years has really kind of become like the queen of horror again, even a bigger way than she ever was before. She's really stepped into that role, and I love it that she's such a positive force for the genre. She's like on Twitter all day, every day, tweeting about like new filmmakers and new things she's watched on Shudder, and she's just so positive and such a great force. But I know that she penned this editorial piece talking about how she hates the term scream queen and thinks it should be taken away. And then you have other actresses, like your Tiffany Shepses and your Felissa Roses, who still like the term and have defended it. But like, where do you fall on that? And then the whole concept in general. Do you have other scream queens that we're not going to talk about today? Like, what's just your overall take on it?
Yeah, it's really weird because I guess I grew up with like a more skewered view of it. So like, whenever I heard the term, I took it literal. Like, I thought it was like literally like I would always hear it in the context of like Janet Leigh, Jamie Lee Curtis. I thought it was literally the actresses that did a lot of horror that were literally known for screaming. And, because everybody, they all have their kind of signature trademark scream. Like, I think Jamie Lee Curtis might have the most signature, like, distinctive one out of anybody. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, I can always tell her scream other everybody else. But, yeah, it wasn't until, like, the Fangoria era, like, the late 80s, where they were doing a lot of Linnea Quigley coverage, when it was always, like, they always, phrase her Scream Queen, Linnea Quigley, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, like... I kind of knew that, like, the way it was being used later was kind of like a different term. And I know they claim, like, they pinned that term for them. But, like, yeah, so, like, I'm not as, like, hotly debated about it. It's just, like, to me, you're not a real scream queen unless you've done, like, a good run of, like, horror movies that people actually know and stuff. Like, I know there's, like, a lot of, like, girls that are more basically models and they try to say screams. But to me, it's, like, either you got the filmography to back that name up or you don't,
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it now too. I think it is a title still worth using, but I think it's one that there should be like some kind of level of pride to it. I know Crampton's point, which is true when they talk about this in the documentary too, about how it can become a little bit of an albatross around their neck.
Yeah.
And you can be viewed by the industry in a negative way if it's, you just do those horror movies. But I think that's what separates this. And just like you, I think when I was younger, I just assumed like, well, any girl who's in a horror movie or two is like a scream queen, right? And now I kind of look at it more in the regard of it is people like Quigley and Stevens and Bauer and Shepis and Rose, right? The ones who seem to love working in this genre, and they can even be like above the title names, and that's not to take anything away, but like Marilyn Burns would be an example, right? I love Marilyn Burns in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and she did a couple other things, but I wouldn't call her a scream queen, right? Because she did one or two horror movies, and then that was kind of it, So I think the people who stick around and seem very into the genre and are like the star attractions, that's who I think that title deserves to be on.
Yeah, like I think is definitely a term that's been bastardized, much in the same way porn star has been bastardized. Because like when I was a kid and like you would like read articles about whatever. Mainly about Deep Throat. I always heard about Deep Throat when I was a kid for some reason. I think because it was like the highest grossing whatever. And you would hear like porn star Linda Lovelace, porn star John Holmes. So like it's like, well, you're either a star or you're not. And it's like then it became like literally anybody in their first porno movie was a porn star. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of that type of thing. It's like, yeah, it's a meaningless title, but like, yeah, like when the three women we're talking about today, Linnea, Brink, and Michelle, like, yeah, like, I think when they, and it's not to say that nobody else is a scream queen, because there's obviously other ones, like, I always knew about Debbie Rochon, and obviously the more modern day one, or I guess for, maybe the early 2000s was Tiffany Shepis, but, like, yeah, it's just kind of like that thing of, like, it's been way, way overused, because I want to say maybe even Diamond Dave, his daughter, Avi Lee Roth, tried to pull that, say she was a scream queen. And then, like, it turned out, like, she really was, like, only in a couple movies that were, like, homemade or whatever. And it's just, like...
Yeah, and I think it's also just kind of gone away just because I guess there's something about the market and the way things are now. I mean, and this isn't just because I'm a huge fan and kind of know her, but I think... And I've seen other people say this. I think it's arguable that Tiffany Shepis is kind of like the last scream queen, at least of like the breed we're talking about now, right? Because I think she represents like where her heyday is kind of the last big gasp of physical media, right? And when physical media is not a thing anymore, what's a scream queen now? You don't have any women who are they're being sold as like the star attractions of these films anymore. I think we're back to the heavy focus in horror being the filmmakers and just the concepts and not necessarily the performers. I don't know. Can you think of anybody post her that would like any recent additions that you would consider in that realm?
Not Tiffany Shepis at all. Like again, it's going back to like that mainstream, like there's like the mainstream word of the use of the word and like the whatever, but not really after Tiffany. But I would say like the more modern, like mainstream one. Like, I think Jennifer Love Hewitt briefly picked up the title of a scream queen in terms of mainstream movies. But yeah, and like, I don't know what you would call her. I wouldn't call her a scream queen, but I felt like they tried for marketing purposes. People tried to kind of put Misty Monday as a scream queen, but I don't think she really was. She just was more like Julie Strain, where she was like a B-movie queen.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, like, and I think out of everybody, like really, like the only person, and obviously it's because she's kind of the newest one, but I think the only person that's really still around is like Tiffany Shepis, and even then, the work she's doing now is way different than the stuff she was doing in the early 2000s.
Yeah, well, and there's other reasons for that, right?
Yeah.
She's in her 40s now, and so Hollywood doesn't have as much usage for her anymore.
Which, by the way, like I almost did a shit post on Facebook the other day, but I was like, what's the point? I'll just be, whatever. People might take it the wrong way, but like, apparently the world was shocked this week, Trev, when Liz Hurley on Instagram or somewhere put out a bikini photo, and it just like. It shocked the world that she was like looking as amazing as she always ever has. And I'm just like, I don't know exactly how old she is, but I know Liz Hurley's got to at least be in her 50s now. And I'm just like, this is somebody that literally just disappeared overnight out of mainstream Hollywood films, probably like around the time she hit 40. You know what I mean? Like, like, come on, like enough of it. Like, I'm not saying talent doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that like looks is everything, but like, don't write somebody off because like they hit a birthday on the calendar and they're quote unquote too old, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, like I mean, to go back to Crampton is the ultimate example of that, right? Just gone for so long, comes back still gorgeous, right? Yeah. Gorgeous, and then like just such like a great, the work she's done since coming back too. She's one of those ones now who. I mean, even though she doesn't like the term, I'd say she's probably the biggest scream queen right now because I think she's the primary actress that everyone is trying to get in their horror films. And I do agree. If I'm watching a movie and she shows up, at least you're going to be entertained during her scenes. So,
yeah, I don't know, I would kind of, and I totally get the reasons, but like Barbara Crampton, like I'm going to go actually scream queen, and the reason I'm going to go scream queen because her role in what was it, The Beyond or whatever, or what's the movie with Ken Foray, the weird interdimension, From Beyond, yeah, I'm sorry, I always get the titles mixed up. The Beyond is the Italian one. From Beyond. I'm like our girl Barbara, she's rocking some tight leather.
Oh yeah.
like she's definitely like, I would say like in the bigger budget Linnea type of role in that movie. You know what I mean? So
no, that's the thing. I would say especially like her place in horror right now, she is like the scream queen. And I say that in the reference of like, she seems to me like the queen of all of them, right? She's the one who I would imagine they all look up to and, respect. And I feel like if you had a convention of all of them, she'd be like the King Arthur role. Right? You feel like she should be at the head of the table, essentially.
For sure. So I guess getting to the movies we're talking about today, one thing we do need to set up a little bit, Trev, is like, this is like, even though I don't think we really planned it out this way, just these were three notable films because it kind of showcased these women. But ironically, even though these are some like the kind of the all-time classics of the genre, they all came out pretty much at the same time in the same year.
Isn't that crazy? This is like the second time it's happened. This is like I pitched the Lucinda Dickey one, and we're like, oh man, all three of those came out like within months of each other.
Yeah.
And then that happened again with this one, because I would agree with, like, when you look at these three, even though one of these doesn't have all three of them, but still, like, I would point to these three probably as, if you're talking about them as a trio, I think these three movies kind of give you like an overall great look at their powers. Yeah. But it is just so fabulous. They're all 1988 movies, and they all are kind of linked in a way. There's actually like kind of a through line, even production wise, that goes along with these.
Exactly. So the first one we want to talk about is the all-time classic, and I would say this is probably right. Like, I don't know, it's a toss-up, but I think this might be the most famous out of the three. But talking about Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama.
Yeah, I'd say it's a toss-up between this one and the next one, but I think the title on this one is maybe a little bit more memorable. I don't know, that's a hard call, but mileage may vary. But
yeah, for sure. And I don't know how in depth we want to go, but I guess just the basic framework of this story, and it's very I think, and like I said, like I only saw this movie for the first time about 6 months ago on Shudder watching Joe Bob, and like I don't know how this kind of evaded me for so long because it was it checked so many genre checkbox for me, but it's basically. In this movie, like, talk about moving along at a lightning quick pace. Like, the setup of this movie happens so quickly. Like, basically, we were introduced to a sorority who's hazing two new members, which is Michelle Bauer, which I guess real quick we got to say. So Michelle Bauer, that was her name when she first got into acting. That was actually her husband at the time's name. She got a divorce. She kept the stage name. Her husband sued for her to stop using that name.
Yep.
She remarried. She remarried somebody with the last name of McClellan. So for these, I think for two of the three or all three of these, she's billed as Michelle McClellan, but her overall career she's known as Michelle Bauer. So I'm just going to refer to her as Michelle Bauer.
Yeah, I think what happened. I mean, she's billed as McClellan in these and then some other films, but I've read that basically like because she had already made the name as Bauer, like it was just causing too much confusion. Fans weren't taking to it, and so she basically like went back to her ex-husband, and they finally worked something out.
Exactly. So basically the setup of this movie is, like I said, these two girls are getting hazed. The two girls getting hazed are Michelle Bauer and Brinke Stevens. And, I mean, I guess we can, be honest. This is a pretty exploitative opening with the kind of semi-nude paddling scene. And we're also introduced to again, pure 80s. When you have a group of guys, you always got to have a crew, right, Trev?
Oh, yeah. And in particular, this kind of crew, right? We got, because this is even going to come up again in this episode. But these are three nerdy frat guys.
Exactly.
Which is weird, too. Like the idea that the frat allowed in these three nerds. What do they have, like a nerd quota they have to fill or something?
Right. Well, yeah, it was like, are they only, like, was it just a bad semester? And they only got nerds? Which I got to say, like, I can't really, like, personally identify with like the nerds of the 80s. Like, I didn't wear glasses, I wasn't like into math, I wasn't, you know what I mean, I wasn't into science or anything, so I wouldn't specifically say that like I like strongly personally identify with the nerds, but there's something about 80s nerds in movies, even from a kid to now, I love nerd characters, and it's always fun to kind of watch them come out of their shells in the course of movies.
I think it's that. I think because I love 80s punks. I think we've talked about that before. Like 80 movie punks is like my favorite group, and then but I know what you mean about nerds, and then there's something about 80s movies in general, and especially in this genre, in this realm, where it's kind of fascinating how they just kind of, there was like these lumped together categories that were in everything. And so you had like the nerds, you had the punks. I think like fitness and aerobic girls is another one. Like ditzy blondes. There's just like these general groups that are just so indicative of the 80s. And I love them all, especially now, because it's, like I said, it's just a nostalgic thing. So I'm with you. Like Revenge of the Nerds, Assault of the Party Nerds, stuff like that. I love them.
So the three nerd characters here, we have Rivers Cuomo of the band Weezer as Calvin. No, actually, like this guy he looks exactly like the guy from Weezer, like exactly. And he even acts like him. But I didn't put this together until my second viewing this last week, Trev. Andrus Jones, I always knew him from a different 80s movie, which I think came out the same year, which was actually Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Mm-hmm. And in that one, he has like a pretty distinctive scene where he's one of the main character's brother, and he does karate. So like when he goes into his dream world, he's a karate master, and he actually has a karate fight with Freddy, and then like Freddy turns like invisible, for I remember, and he kind of like his glove flies through the air and impales him. Yeah. Yep. So it was a real treat, and I gotta say, like I was shocked once I realized it was the same guy. And then also that those movies came out at the same time. And of course, things like scripts and how quick you're shooting and stuff matter. But like, yeah, like I think this guy, like, I think he took a huge step, because even though he is playing a nerd character in this movie, he's very timid, which it is a character. But he also, I don't know, like he seemed very green as an actor. So I'm surprised, like, he was able to go book a mainstream movie like at the same time. Mm-hmm. But also probably more recognizable to horror fans, we have the great Hal Havens as Jimmy, who also was in Night of the Demons as like the pig punk rocker guy.
Mm-hmm. I believe it's Linnea Quigley who brought him to this movie because of Night of the Demons. She introduced him to the director, David Dakota.
That would make total sense.
Yeah.
And then the other guy, I want to say John Stewart Wildman as Keith. I didn't know him from anything else, but
no.
But it is a good nerd crew, because you kind of have like the two nerdy guys, and then you have like Hal Havens. He's not nearly as much as he was in Night of the Demons, but he still plays like in the old movies with the crew. You always had to have the slob guy in the crew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he kind of plays that character.
So the three of them, of course, do what these groups would always do in an 80s movie. They go and spy on the sorority, and they're lucky enough to spy on the exact night that this hazing is happening. So they get to watch Michelle Bauer and Brinke Stevens get paddled in their underwear.
Yeah, and then like that's like not enough. Like they got to like sneak in and like see what else is going on. and like they got to watch the girl shower, and then like you know there's some hijinks. It's very, wouldn't you say? I mean, we got to admit this is very inspired by Porky's, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, I mean it's totally, and don't you miss the days? Isn't it like so? How innocent does it seem of the days when our heroes were just spying on women in the shower, as if there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
And then like you always have the scene where like the girls were momentarily surprised, but it was never like traumatizing. It was oh silly, whatever. I mean, every movie from back then had it. Not only Porky's, but Private School. I mean, just every movie had you know everybody getting Revenge of the Nerds. They like that was like some borderline real rape shit. And
Revenge of the Nerds takes it a little further, unfortunately. But
you know, we didn't know any better.
That's a discussion for another time on that one.
Yeah. So they get busted, and I wanted to like throw a quick shout out real quick because I really like Robin Rochelle. I think her real name was Robin Still, but her stage name I guess was Robin Rochelle. She plays Babs, like the main girl, the celebrity, like the leader. And I thought like, man, she's really good in this movie. Maybe she like went on to be a screen queen too. But yeah, she wasn't nearly successful, and unfortunately passed away a few years after this movie, probably like 7 or 8 years later. But
she throws off like a real Sybil Danning energy. That's
right.
She looks like Sybil Danning, like that kind of tall, statuesque, badass blonde.
And before I slip some on, I wanted to ask you, Trev, what did you think? Like, I thought it was weird because you know the iconic Sorority Babes Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama poster. It always confused me because like there's some background stuff going on, but the main girl standing in the front, like the face and the body type looks more like Robin Rochelle Babs, and she's even holding the paddle behind her back, which she was the one in the movie that used the paddle. But then the outfit is what Linnea is wearing. Like, did you ever notice that?
It's strange. I don't know if they just couldn't. I mean, it's weird to say they couldn't get likeness rights or something, or if they made the poster first or whatever. Because then Robin Rochelle is on the poster in the background in her like later costume,
right?
So she's kind of like doubled up. It's strange that like it's Brinke that's like basically not represented on the cover at all.
Right.
But you're right that the one who is Linnea Quigley looks nothing like her, and I don't know why she's holding the paddle.
Yeah,
she should just be holding like the crowbar, right? Like why not the crowbar?
Exactly. I guess because it's like fuck it, we need to sell this movie. Might as well just put all the elements together. Because I would say Linnea is more already in this one. Because Linnea, like on the documentary, when you see her early movies, she has more of I don't know what you would say, just like her very early role. She had more of like just a regular kind of like hot girl body, whereas like by the time you get to Sorority Babes, like she had really not only slimmed down but really like toned up a lot. So it's like this more voluptuous whatever kind of representation on the cover. It's not really representative of like what Linnea looked like in the movie at all.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I think a lot of people only know Linnea or think of Linnea primarily from Return of the Living Dead, which makes sense. I'd say that's her most iconic role. But it's strange to me that, I don't know if you had this too, where when I revisit Return of the Living Dead now, which I do a lot.
I love it.
I don't know if, like, when I look at her in that, I don't really see Linnea Quigley as much, you know? Because like you said, she doesn't, like, everything else with her, she got that, like, really toned, fit body. Not that she's not in shape in Return of the Living Dead, she of course is, but she just, I mean, there's the case too of the makeup and the shorter hair and everything, but she does not look at all in that film like she does in almost everything else that she's in.
Oh, it's probably because she invented the horror workout, Trev.
Oh yeah, well we can talk about that briefly later too.
When you're curling those dismembered body parts and you're doing jumping jacks with zombies next to you, you're really gonna tone up quick. But yeah, so basically, you know, it's like, like they're doing the hazing of these girls, and then all of a sudden they caught the nerds doing the peeping act, you know, whatever. And so basically, like, Babs lays down the challenge of like, okay, you peeping nerds, like, you know, we won't call the cops or whatever if you go do something, and also with the girls. So like, they basically give them the mission to go to a bowling alley and retrieve a particular bowling trophy, you know, just kind of just like a test of whatever scavenger hunt type of dare type situation, you know. And like, now this is where the movie gets really intriguing to me. Like, what was the setup that like Babs, like her dad owned the shopping mall or something?
Yeah, which I don't understand, like, because they're still like breaking in, so I don't understand like what the purpose is of even saying that. They just say like, it basically says that as a way to like calm her friends down, I think, or to just give her the like why she knows where the like the video surveillance room is. Maybe that's what they were building at. But yeah, her dad owns she's like the rich bitch, so her dad owns the mall that this bowling alley's at, that is to send everybody to on a dare.
So she actually herself doesn't have to break in. She actually has keys to the place. And I don't know why. I just thought this was like a funny choice. Like when her and the other like main sorority girls, like the two other ones, like go in, like she has to like unlock the locks and everything. And she does the break in and unlocks the locks and everything while like holding a lit cigarette. Did you notice that? Like talk about a change in I mean, now there's hardly any smoking in films, but even back then, like not only was there smoking, but people would smoke during main activities to the plot. So yeah, so we basically, long story short, she's checking in on the securities, which if you like even watch the movie closely, it's so obvious that the shopping mall is in no way connected to the bowling alley, right?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Because they never have the shot that shows like the entrance to the bowling alley from the mall. In fact, they don't, like the group that breaks in just goes to like the regular bowling alley door.
Right.
So,
which to say it too, like I always like, you know, the title, Trev, Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. Like what is the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama? Is it just that the bowling alley is supposed to be like shitty and run down? You know what I mean?
Well, you know, the story behind that title is this was actually made under the title The Imp for reasons we'll get to in a moment. And they decided, I think it was Charles Band decided that title's not catchy enough. And from what I understand, at Charles Band's building and where everyone worked, they just had a contest where everybody threw out different names. And eventually this was just something, I would assume someone just kind of said this as a joke. But knowing Charles Band, you know, they're just like, that's the one. That's what we'll run with.
Yeah. So anyway, like they break in, and also with Touche, there's like another character who's thrown in is a janitor, and this is the great Buck Flower, who always played a homeless man usually in movies. Now he's playing a janitor.
Well, not much difference in his characterization, though.
No,
he's either a drunk homeless guy or he's a drunk janitor. I was really, because like you, my first introduction to this movie was through Joe Bob on the Shudder show, too. And I then when I revisited for this, I totally forgot the Buck Flower was in it. And I was just excited. To see him all over again. And he's great. He's a scene stealer in this, too.
For real. Like you almost wish that he had more scenes, but then again, the plot flies by so fast, it probably would have been harder to actually beef up his role.
Like, I'd say all three of these movies have some, like, genuinely funny humor in them. You know, obviously, sometimes it's just funny because of what the movies are, but I think some of his stuff in this is, like, actually genuinely good comedy with, like, how, you know, especially when they have the scenes where he, like, is, like, misrepeating everything people are saying to him.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, the first time I watched this, like, you know, the first maybe 30 minutes or so, like, the movie does, like, kind of show its low-budget roots once they do the more action scenes later. But early on, I was like, damn, man, like, I can't believe this isn't, like, you know, a bigger cult film, because, like, at first it really was, like, to me, it felt like it was on the budget level of, like, a shopping mall or something at first. I was like, damn, they got some good locations. The mall was awesome. The bowling alley was pretty good. Like, yeah, and then, like, you know, like, I'm really surprised, you know, I don't know what the dollar amount of this budget was, but I'm really surprised at everything they accomplished in it, man. It was some good stuff.
Wikipedia has it listed as an estimated $90,000, which sounds doable, I'd say.
Yeah. I guess especially in $1987, you know. So, yeah, so basically they're looking for this bowling trophy. Calvin, the Rivers Cuomo looking nerd, he stumbles upon Linnea Quigley because, like, there's a funny bit where they're like, "Oh, how are we going to break in?" And it turns out the door's just open. Well, it turns out because the place has already been broken into by Linnea Quigley, and she's very gingerly being very gentle with a cash register and a crowbar. And I have to say, like, yeah, like, there's something about Linnea, like, I love her introduction scene in here. And there's something, like, there's a mode that she goes into with certain characters. Not every character, but certain ones. And, I feel like, what was her name in Return of the Living Dead? Trash?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like Spider and Trash are either sisters or cousins, because they kind of talk in the same way. Like, have you ever fantasized about being dead? Like, you know what I mean? That voice that she puts on, she kind of talks to Calvin.
There's that, and she does a thing in this too, which I like in movies, in these kind of B movies where, and this is going to sound negative, I don't mean it that at all. I think it's a positive, where she kind of plays above the material a little bit. Like if you watch her in like group shots when everyone's talking, if you look at her, she's kind of reacting to the dialogue and like how dumb it is, and kind of rolling her eyes at the other characters and stuff. And you can play that here. Is just her character, despite her, thinks all these people are stupid, but it kind of gets a nice like meta quality to it where you feel like she understands what this movie is and is kind of reacting to it.
Yeah, like I love like how corny Calvin is, where he's like, "Oh, if you need money, I can loan you $1," and she's like, "Listen, dipshit, I'm robbing the fucking place." So it's like I'd say from that first like entrance to her, like her and Calvin already have a great, comedic rapport. Like totally two different worlds. You have this cool, edgy kind of like borderline punk criminal girl and this total, Revenge of the Nerds type dweeb. So it's like, and it's funny too when the rest of the gang come in. I want to say it's Michelle Bauer's like, "Ooh, what's that?" Like talking about Linnea, like she's so gross or something. Yeah. So basically, long story short, like she's doing her thing. They get to the bowling trophy and it knocks over. And then, like, the smoke and everything comes out. And then we get introduced to the imp. And why don't you talk a little bit about the imp and describe him, Trev?
Well, the imp who I see referred to, and I don't remember if they ever say this in the movie, but in like some of the press stuff you see is called Uncle Impy. Yeah. He's a small little creature who is represented by a pretty cool little puppet that looks very much like the Ghoulies, I'd say. Yeah. The Ghoulies with, like, elf ears is kind of the visual look of him. And he's got a very interesting voice that I don't think you expect to come out of his mouth. He's I don't know how to even describe it. Kind of a very deep voice. He's voiced by Dookie Flyswatter.
Oh yeah, Dookie.
Dookie Flyswatter, who he's popped up in quite a few B movies. He's a punk singer from L.A. He's got a horror punk band called Haunted Garage. He works with like Fred Olen Ray and Dakota quite a bit, and he does the voice. And the imp is your typical kind of like sarcastic, wisecracking horror movie villain in the vein of like a Leprechaun or a Chucky. And he basically tells the group, that now that you've released me, you each get a wish. That's the rules here. And they kind of there's a little bit of where they kind of try to turn him down. He essentially says, no, you basically have to have a wish. I'm going to give you a wish each. And as you might expect from a movie, if you've ever seen a movie about wishes. In fact, I have it on, a good accord that apparently Patty Jenkins saw this film and was inspired. She decided to write Wonder Woman 84. But this definitely follows monkey paw rules. Yeah. So we start getting the wishes, and they all have disastrous consequences.
Yeah, probably what happened was her and her friends when she was in middle school. They probably rented this from the video store, and she was like, if only there's a way. I heard early cuts of it. That instead of the magic rock, they actually had like a CGI version of the imp in Wonder Woman 84. But when they suddenly realized he had the voice of a 1970s pimp, that maybe that wouldn't fly over so good with the general audience.
Yeah, that basically is what Dookie Flyswatter is doing here.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, when we get to Nightmare Sisters, we'll really go down the rabbit hole of the man of 1,000 voices, Dookie Flyswatter. But I want to say, too, there's like this weird, like it's in the early scenes, it's like the opening shot of the sorority house, and there's like two kind of nerdy guys walking by the camera, like it's just an establishing shot, like out on the street. And like one of them, like I noticed it because like they have like a little bit of dialogue, and you just hear this say something to the one guy, like, "Ooh," and like I was like, "Oh, that voice sounds familiar," and like I'm 99% sure it was Dookie that was walking through that shot. Like, so
well, I believe one of them was the writer, whose name I believe is Sergei Hasenex or something. But those two guys who walk by are definitely like people involved with the production. Yeah. I know that from the commentary. I can't remember exactly who, but it might be the writer or it might be like the producer.
Yeah. So like so it's like basically like the wishes start out right away, and then Hal Havens, I think he's called Jimmy in the movie, he like instantly wishes to be rich, so he gets a pile of gold. Mm-hmm. And then the second wish, if I'm remembering this, like doesn't Brink wish to be the prom queen?
She wishes to be a prom queen. I think even maybe before that is when one of the nerdy guys, like the imp basically says, like, don't you wish that Michelle Bauer's character was like in love with you?
Right.
And he says yes, and it turns Michelle Bauer into a like basically oversexed. So she suddenly they just kind of all move out of frame, and she's suddenly standing there in her like sexy lingerie, and she becomes like an oversexed nymphomaniac who just wants nothing but to bone this guy.
Yeah, like there's a real theme here. You know, like they're all different, but I think Michelle Bauer definitely has that more kind of pin-up quality to her, and that's literally the line she was working before she really transitioned into acting. She was doing a lot of, you know, Playboy, Penthouse type modeling, whatever, and like they always, like, you know, it's way more extreme obviously in Nightmare Sisters, but they always take her from being an attractive person in these movies to like some kind of magic spell turns her into the hottest, wanting to have the most sex ever character.
Yeah, I mean, none of these three are shy about nudity by any means, as we're going to see over the course of these films. But I did notice that she is definitely the one who is usually given like the token sex scenes in the movies, and as you just said, is usually like the most seductive character.
Yeah, and she's totally like game for it too, and like I think she, you know, she like, and what's interesting, even though like they're all kind of like similar setups to the characters, I think the characters that she plays in this, Hollywood, Chainsaw Hookers, and Nightmare Sisters are all completely different, and like that's the thing is like you kind of in your mind you kind of lump all these movies together kind of, but then when you watch them, especially these particular three that we watched, I was actually really blown away by the range that all three actresses had, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah
So yeah, so like that wish kind of hits two birds with one stone, because obviously Michelle Bauer's transformed into a nymphomaniac, so she doesn't really get a wish, so she's basically just like raping this nerd in the locker room. And I've never seen a bowling alley. I was wondering if like they had to go to a different location for this or something, but like I've never seen a bowling alley have like full on showers and stuff.
Yeah, that was a different location.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then Brink becomes the prom queen, and I want to say, and nobody else really gets a wish, right, before they realize it's all bogus.
Yeah, I mean, but we do get more complications right away, because Uncle Impy realizes that they're also being watched by the Babs and her friends, you know. And he kind of pulls them out of the room, and he turns like the two friends, turns one of them into just like a standard demon, and then for some bizarre reason turns the other one into the Bride of Frankenstein, which is never explained. But
never explained.
I'll run with it. And they just kind of become, you know, his minions that are now chasing the rest of the group and trying to kill them. And then Babs is basically, she never really aligns with the group, but she is also stuck in there and trying to get away from the imp and everything that's happening.
Yeah, and like Babs, they kind of set up too that like all the doors of the shopping mall and obviously the bowling alley probably too, since they're all supposed to be connected, even though we know they're probably not. Like the imp has also electrified all the exits and entrances, so like they can't get out, and Babs like gets kind of temporarily knocked out when she tries to make a run for it. But and then it just kind of quickly, you know, the slob guy realizes his gold is really just spray painted wooden blocks, and then like Brink, like, doesn't her really nice prom dress just also instantly turn into like all crappy, dirty old dress or whatever?
Yeah, it's just like all rags and
yeah.
So
like at that point, like pretty much the two people who didn't make wishes, well, Babs didn't, but she's like on the run, whatever. But stuck in the bowling alley is we have Calvin and Spider, and like they pretty much they pretty much realize like they got to get away from this. And I'm trying to remember, like, what is the first exact tack? Is it Brink runs out into the shopping mall and she gets chased around by the demon girls?
Well, I think like I think it's Hell Havens who is killed first, right?
Oh yeah, he is killed first.
Yeah. The minions like pull him apart basically, and then bowl with his head, which of course was going to happen in this movie. So
exactly. Mm-hmm. Then everybody kind of freaks out and scatters, and then like Brink, and it was like a little weird too, because like I want to say, I mean, not that they really ever took any of like their quote unquote star status into account when they made these movies, but wouldn't you say like in this movie, Brink is the one that kind of gets like the least screen time, kind of?
She does, yeah. She's kind of I don't want to say inconsequential in this, but because Linnea is clearly like the hero, and because Michelle gets the big sex scene, Brink is kind of the one you don't remember as much coming out of this.
Yeah,
which is weird because like I part of me wonders. Well, I guess we can talk about this after all three of them. Like talk about each three kind of individually. But I bet Brink was like having a ball making it at least still because of the three, she seems to be the one just in general that was like loved this genre the most and just was like obsessed with horror even as like a young girl. She's kind of like a, there's always talk about fake nerd girls. That is definitely not Brink Stevens. No. Brink Stevens is a very real nerd girl from very early on in her life, which. Yeah,
when she was a kid, she shaved her eyebrows to look like Mr. Spock.
Yeah, and there's some great pictures when she was a teenager. She would actually go to like Forey Ackerman parties doing Vampirella cosplay.
Yeah.
Which makes me think I saw her in that costume, and then like she later did some other photo shoots as Vampirella, and it's just like mind-boggling to me that when they finally made the Vampirella movie in the mid-'90s, the Wynorski film, that they didn't ever think to use her.
Yeah, that's weird. Like I don't know the story behind that, but that seens like
I know they
opportunity.
wanted to use. I believe Wynorski wanted to use Julie Strain, which of course is the other obvious option.
Right.
And then I think Talissa Soto was kind of like forced upon him, and he's always said that's like his biggest problem with the movies. He didn't think she was right, and he wasn't happy about it. But yeah, I think it should have been Strain or Stevens for sure.
I think Talissa Soto at that point at least even is probably too big of a star to even do that type of movie, or should have. You know what I mean? Like.
Well, her performance definitely suggests she thought so.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like that. If you're making that type of movie, a Vampirella movie, like you have a certain very niche audience, and I don't think, unless like they were thinking the opposite of like, oh, we'll get the biggest star we can and make it more mainstream. But yeah, that is a weird choice. So yeah, like I'd say like the only time like the movie feels draggy a little bit is you constantly get these setups. Where Linnea, Spider, and Calvin are just like they're always getting locked in, and like they always just sit down and kind of like wait it out, and like it kind of robs the movie of a little bit of energy during those scenes, even though they're great scenes, and it's really like the what do you say, the character development scenes. Like I wish they kind of would have staged those a little different to have something more urgent going on, like the
you want more like activity from them for sure. I mean, it's clear when you watch this movie, like they were, and this is true of all these movies, I suppose. You can tell which moments the budget went into, and then to like save money, rather than have more action scenes, as you said, we get a lot of kind of just exposition-driven dialogue scenes.
Right. And it's like, and so like they kind of get, take turns getting attacked by the minions. Finally, like I say, like the next kind of like, like everybody else gets killed off one by one. Eventually, the one nerd escapes. Michelle Bauer, and I thought this was weird too. Like Michelle Bauer, like the nerd escapes, like he's tired of just being raped over and over by her. I mean, they never actually technically have sex, but it's just constantly this. And I felt bad for Michelle Bauer, the scene where she takes his shoe off and bites his like foot sock. Like I was like, whoa, put this sweaty guy's sock in your mouth.
I mean, according to the commentary, that was just all her. You don't have to feel bad for her because that was just all her. Like she was game for it. And she was just doing, yeah.
So yeah, he gets attacked by the minions, and he gets kind of like, it's kind of a cheapo special effect, but he kind of gets his face burned in the kitchen area of the bowling alley. So he gets off. So like really the majority of this movie is kind of like Spider and Calvin trying to survive, and then basically Babs is on her own, and eventually like they do catch up with Babs. Like there's kind of like a cool combo moment where Babs like takes the one girl who's a minion and like throws her into the through the bowling machine. And Calvin and I won't say Spider actually rolls a bowling ball. And again, like the budget shows a little bit because like I thought we were going to get like a great splatterhead effect when this happened, Trev, but it's just totally kind of happens off screen, unfortunately.
Yeah,
they bowl the ball down and hit her in the face, but you never actually see it. It's just kind of implied.
And if you're wondering the sense of humor that this movie is working on, the level of it, the other girl who's named Taffy, she is pulled apart so that they can say it's a taffy pull.
Yeah, right. And so yeah, like I like that little scene though, like the behind the lanes of the bowling alley where Babs kind of gets confronted by the imp, and the imp, I say the imp is pretty good. Like unless there's a shot I'm forgetting, he's really not like a fully mobile puppet. He's basically a hand puppet, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't think you ever see him like walking or anything. They didn't even like. Sometimes you watch one of these movies and they do like the separate like leg rig to just have on screen, but
we don't even get that. But one thing I did want to give him credit for only having a hand puppet, like they do. Did you notice they did some really cool tricks where he kind of like leans into frame, out of frame, whatnot, to make it seem like he's got some movement going on. Because they could have just totally cheaped out and just did like he just pops into, you know, out of thin air into something or something. But like, no, he's kind of like on the move. It's implied. And like, yeah, this is where I feel like this. Like, I don't know what do you feel about this scene where like Babs kind of wins. She's kind of like, yeah, fuck you, imp, or whatever she says. Like, you know, we think they've killed the other minion girl, and our great imp here says like, oh, it doesn't matter if she's dead, I'll just make you whatever. And then he just instantly converts Babs into a, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I like that Babs gets turned into a villain because I think like she looks great when she becomes like the kind of like the evil punk and everything. But I do think this could kind of go back to what you were saying about the slow portion of the movie. Is I feel like you really want to see Babs and Spider interact more in this movie.
Yeah.
Because they kind of don't, and I think those two characters obviously would like not get along, and I think that would be like a good driving force through the middle of this movie if those two had to work together for a while.
Yeah, because like, you know, like Babs never made a wish. Well, I guess the minion girls never made a wish either. But it just like in this particular moment in particular for me, it's kind of just like the game kind of feels rigged now. You know, like I would have liked a better setup. Like I do like that Babs gets converted into being evil, but yeah, I just wish it would have happened in kind of a cooler way. But that kind of leads to a great action scene where Spider and Babs fight, and like, how would we describe Babs' new form? It's like almost like a kind of punkish leather dominatrix. What you can say? Yeah,
I'd say so. Definitely like dominatrix, like leaning. You know.
Yeah, and like I don't know what the deal was with Robin Rochelle. I don't know if she was like a no nudity type actress or what, but I mean, I thought she had the look to be a scream queen for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I hate talking about like negatively about anyone, and it's super unfortunate, as we said, that unfortunately she actually took her own life later on from depression and stuff. But I also know that this fight scene between the two of them, apparently she was kind of drunk while filming the scene, and got actually too rough with Linnea Quigley, and Linnea Quigley didn't say anything because she's a professional, but after the fact went to the director and said, hey, just so you know, she was really like roughing me up, and I could kind of smell the booze on her. So I think, unfortunately, even at this point, Rochelle had some demons that maybe got in the way of her career.
Yeah. I had just read that she had a drinking problem, but I didn't really know like that was something that really spilled into like on the set type incidences. But yeah, like it's pretty cool, and like we kind of get like a Molotov cocktail thing here that they have going on. I guess there was also earlier too, there was like a weird thing where they're just trapped in like a stock room at the bowling alley and they just randomly find a handgun. What did you make of that?
Yeah, you think they could have just got that from like Buck Flowers or something. There could be like a better explanation, or I mean, I was gonna say introduce a mall security guard, but that would require paying another actor. So,
well, I would totally have bought it if she just would have found it like under the cash register while she was robbing the place. Like I feel like you could have slipped it in then, you know what I mean? But yeah, it was weird. But yeah, there's like kind of that cool fight between Babs and Spider. And then, like they burn her up, whatever. And
good burn effect too.
Yeah, and then basically,
stuntman burn.
Yeah, it. Like what is it like? Just like all of a sudden they cut to the guy in the full burn costume type thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's. I mean, when I say stuntman, it's like it's definitely like Robin Rochelle turns into a man and gets set on fire. But
it's kind of like the end of Halloween 2. Where Michael Myers all of a sudden has a much bulkier jumpsuit on when he catches on fire. But yeah, and like at this point, like we have, it's pretty late into the movie that we kind of get the expository backstory where Spider and Calvin bump into Buck Flowers and, or Buck Flower. And like he explains that like, you know, there was this guy who, you know, used to come to the bowling alley way back in the day. Like, I guess it was supposed to be like the 50s or 60s. And like, he became a perfect bowler and he was awesome. And, you know, like it was basically, I guess he had the power. He had the wish from the imp or whatever. And like, in order to cheat the imp, he had trapped him into the bowling trophy. So like, we find out the imp has been sitting in this bowling trophy for like decades at the bowling alley, you know? And it's kind of funny too, where he's like, Buck is like, and you let him out? Why'd you let him out? It's just like, dude, that was, I don't know how that held that imp, because that thing fell like, what did you say, maybe 3 feet onto the floor and completely bust open. So we come into like, you know, basically the final showdown of the movie, and, you know, There's a great stunt where Calvin's actually able to get outside and get to the car, and you know, he's trying to get the getaway car, and the Spider's dealing with the imp, and unfortunately the minion is in the back seat, and you know, he's trying to drive the car, he gets attacked, he flips the car over. It was an amazing car stunt. I was blown away because I didn't think this movie had the budget to pull something like this off.
Yeah, and it's fun, like, again, listening to the commentary, like, being reminded of, like, the ingenuity of these directors like Dakota and Fred Olen Ray, who are, you know, just becoming, like, pros and making these kind of low-budget movies and everything, and hearing them talk about, like, when they had to get a car, because obviously they're going to destroy whatever car they had, and the person going to get the car asking him, like, what do you want? And him just saying, I don't know, just, like, make sure it's a white car, because since we're filming mostly at night, it'll show off better, and, like, we don't have many lights to work with. And just, like, that thought just tells you, like, oh, that's an indie filmmaker right there, you know?
And and you know, a lot of times it would be because the car would get destroyed or something, but I kind of miss, like, old... not just genre movies, but just old, lower budget movies in general. It could be anything, a comedy or anything, where just everybody drove old, crappy cars. I kind of hate when I watch movies now. It kind of like makes it feel fake to me. Like if you notice movies, TV shows now, Trev, everybody has a car that looks like it was like, you know, they bought it in the last 3 years, brand new. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Whenever I see a car in a movie, though, especially this era, that looks like the car here, and just that general style of like that boxy, like kind of car.
Long
I always
car.
I always expect it to suddenly turn into the famous Troma car crash, because that's just what I just always see in my head with that car. Yeah.
So so basically what happens is while that's going on, and I think the imp had his best line where he's like monster in the back seat, you fell for the oldest trick in the book, ha ha ha. This is just a side note because it kind of changes depending on what lighting is on him. But what color do you think the imp is? Is he gray or green or brown?
Yeah, he looks gray. There's even a couple parts where he looks purple, but I think that's clearly just lighting. But yeah, he definitely. I couldn't tell if he was gray or green either.
Yeah. Yeah, I should say I have the 88 Films edition, and they do like a reverse slipcover so you can make it be the imp, but it's not the artwork, but it's not that like mock-up poster that was like really awesome that they did. It's just literally just, you know, they just did a screenshot of the imp from the movie and put him on the cover. But yeah, so Linnea, what was it, like an old tobacco can she gets him in?
Yeah, I believe so. That's what it looks like to me.
But it's really big. It kind of almost looks like a big cookie.
Or like, it looks like it almost looks like it's going to be like a Jack in the Box or something.
Yeah, it does. So she basically just, you know, low budget. She just like, you know, takes the lid off, puts it down on top of him, traps him in. And then basically like it kind of just hard cuts a little. Well, she goes outside and makes sure Calvin's okay. And she has the imp in the can, and, you know, he comes out of the car. He's okay. So like, and this is where I was really like, really? After all that?
I know you're going to say yes.
Yeah, so it I'm assuming this is how she got to the bowling alley. She has like a little kind of rinky-dink dirt bike. It's almost like a moped, but it is a dirt bike. And she kind of tells Calvin to get on. And I think that, I even had this like weird fake Sinbad Kazam memory, like fake memory of a movie where like I thought that they went and threw the imp into like a dumpster, but no, like they just drive away on the dirt bike. You know, there's like the moment of like Calvin's like, where are we gonna go? She's like, back to my place. Like, you know, she's gonna break him off a piece or whatever, and like kind of ride off with a happy ending because, you know, he's a nerd and he's gonna get to be with this hot woman, whatever. But then like, yeah, they just leave the imp on the corner in front of the bowling alley. Like, the first people that would get there, the cops, the fire department, the whoever, rescue, whatever, somebody's going to open that can away.
Yeah, where they leave it and how it's sitting there, there's no way that does not get opened later that day. Like you don't even push it to the side or put it next to put it under a bush or something. You just leave it on the sidewalk. Like, of course someone's going to open, but I guess maybe they're just not our problem, you know?
Yeah, because she's totally like, you know, we got to get out of here. Somebody must have heard like, you know, all the noise, the car crash or whatever. So we got to get out of here before the cops come. But like, I mean, even if you just threw it in the woods, that would at least buy you maybe a couple weeks, a couple months before somebody found it and opened it. But you're guaranteed this shit's going to get opened right
Now, do you
away.
think that was like laziness, or do you think that was meant to be sequel bait?
You know, every time I watch the movie, I take it as laziness. just because like they they drive away and they like intentionally want to end the movie on focusing on the can and the imp being like, come on, let me out now, oh, it's so cramped in here, I'll be a good little imp. So like I feel like they really just did it out of convenience to get to that beat of the end comedy of ending the movie on the imp's silly voice. But yeah, I mean,
now do you know that in a non-COVID world we would have a sequel to this movie right now?
Really?
Are you aware of this?
I saw a listing for a part 2, but not.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, Full Moon started a project which you might have heard of called The Deadly 10.
Yeah.
Where they were going to make 10 new movies, make them very quick, very cheap, and the whole thing was that like if you're a part of their like subscription service or whatever, you could like kind of follow along with the production of the movies online, and then those people would get like first dibs to like the digital downloads of the film. And they made, I think, 3 of them, and then like they were supposed to do like 2 or 3 more last year, but of course COVID messed everything up. And I'm assuming they'll get back going on them because I believe they're funded and everything. And they already announced them all. But one of the ones that was supposed to be filmed last year was Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama 2, co-directed by David Dakota and Brinke Stevens. And I think the subtitle is even The Imp Returns. So I assume I assume it's still going to happen, but who knows when.
Do they have Dookie on board to do the voice?
I hope so. I don't know how you do it.
I'm going to make a prediction about Sorority Babes 2. I think there's going to be a second imp, a female imp, and there's going to be some imp love going on.
Oh boy.
That would be my...
hot hand puppet on hand puppet action.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like this movie blew me away the first time I watched it. Just really more the wildness, the scope and scale. It's definitely a couple notches in budget below like great mall classics like Chopping Mall or even like Night of the Comet or whatever. But like I like the B movie-ish feel. I think it works for this movie. I think there's like enough of a budget and a slickness in the filmmaking here to where it is a quote-unquote real movie, but it also feels like a drive-in movie at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think in that realm of like drive-in B movies, this is kind of like one of the ultimate examples, right? Like kind of everything you want from this kind of movie is here. You got the cheap monster, you got the corny humor, you have the exploitive nudity, you've got the hot girls, you've got the nerds, right? You got an actual one big stunt, you got a stuntman set on fire. This really like checks a lot of boxes in this realm.
Yeah,
it's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, for sure. And I get yeah, like we said, it's hard to say which one is bigger, this one or Chainsaw Hookers, but I feel like this one, at least when you watch it, it has more of an epic feeling.
And I'd say if you can, like as you alluded to, check out the Last Drive-In version on Shudder, because you get the movie and you get some genuinely interesting cut-ins from Joe Bob. And I don't know, so I have the Full Moon Blu-ray of this, which I believe is still readily available. Does the 88 Films Blu-ray also have because this has a feature-length making of that is actually longer than the movie?
Yeah,
on the Full Moon one.
Yeah, it does have that. Like, I think it even has the same menu as the Full Moon, because even though because I have the Full Moon of Chainsaw Hookers, and that menu looks exactly like the 88 films of this. But like, yeah, it does, because like I don't know what happened. Like when I was playing it last night, I started to watch a little bit of it, and it like it seemed like it had like commentary over the documentary. It was weird. I don't know if just my player was messing up or what. But yeah, because I checked the runtime of it, and it was like way longer than the movie, because I thought I was just turning on the commentary because, like I said, the menu's a little janky. But no, it was like, it started out and it was like, I checked the runtime, it was, I believe, 2 hours and 16 minutes, and I think the movie is only like 84 minutes. So yeah, it's on there.
Called Tales from the Bowling Alley. It's funny because the case listed as a featurette, but it's right. Very, very long. Basically, they just had someone on the set at all times with the camera, like filming everything.
Yeah.
And I always think like those making ofs, I love like the trauma making ofs and then stuff like this, where these making ofs are so fascinating. We get to watch like these low budget movies that were made in like a week, to watch like the talent it takes and just the ingenuity. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, because
Dakota, he kind of like introduces that the way that this documentary came out, like all the behind the scenes footage, was he had a friend who, to make a living, taught film at like a university all year, and then the summers this guy would go out and like make a B movie or make a documentary. And he came to the set of Sorority Babes to kind of document everything with the intent, kind of like a Roy Frumkes type thing, where like he was going to make it into a material to show to his students about, hey, this is the way like a low budget film set works, whatever. I was going to say I kind of have like a Rick Dalton experience with David Dakota, like
rip his throat out.
Yeah, rip his throat. No, like how Rick Dalton, like he thought his name in the TV show was Dakota, and then the little girl was like, "It's Dakota 2 or whatever." What? How do you say his name? Because I've heard, even on the documentary, I've heard people call him David Dakota, Daco 2, like how? What's the right way to say it?
I don't know for sure. I've never met him. I've always said Dakota, but
yeah, Dakota.
But
yeah, that's what I always thought it was.
I'm shocked I haven't met him, given all the the people in this like B movie realm that I have met. But
yeah, so you've been to some conventions. Have you met any of the three ladies that we're talking about today?
I've met Linnea Quigley.
Awesome.
She's the only one I've met. Very nice. I didn't get anything from her. I think that was one where like all my money had already been used by the time I got to her table. But chatted with her very briefly. Just told her. I think at that time I was just like, really like Return of the Living Dead. She's heard it 300 times.
300 times that morning.
Day, yeah. But yeah, she was nice. It was cool.
Nice. Always nice. Yeah, and like I don't know, like I know the documentary you watched was a couple years older or whatever, but like just seeing them three like interviewed, there's still something that's interesting to me about all three of them even now, like their personalities. I mean, in all honesty, it's like these movies were made, they were like in their 20s, possibly some of them were made when they were in their early 30s. They were in the physical prime of their lives. They were beautiful women, and that was definitely let's not fool ourselves. That was definitely their beauty was a component of what kind of helped these movies in the marketplace. But like these are actually interesting people, in all honesty.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's easy to say, and again, we still have two more to talk about, which will show this off even more. But it's easy to say like, oh, the Scream Queens, they just have to be hot models, right? And that's where some of them get their start, and that's like as you said, that's where Michelle Bauer came from, was modeling, and Brinke Stevens. But there's no shortage of hot women who want to be in movies in LA. So the fact that these three worked this much and got this reputation and have documentaries about them and have cult followings now, that goes beyond being hot. Yeah. That's a charisma on screen, and that's like a great interaction with the fans and just a passion for the genre. And as you just said, just seeming like interesting, fun, good people. Yeah,
for sure. So moving on to the next one, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. Mm-hmm. This one, now we're switching. Two out of these three were directed by David Dakota, but this one is actually from a different director who's kind of friends with him, Fred Olen Ray. Fred Olen Ray, I've seen some of his movies. I know he's very notorious for making a lot of movies, making them cheap, making them quick. Like I know in recent years there was a lot of discussions about one he made called Evil Tunes, which was briefly.
I like Evil Tunes.
Yeah.
I've seen Evil Tunes, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but it looks interesting. I want to see it. But yeah, and I think, maybe it's just because I sat down and watched all of these over the course of a week and, I was able to kind of, watch them, back to back almost. Like, I think, immediately you can tell he has a different directing style than David Dakota.
And do you mean that in a good way or a bad way? Because
no, I would say I personally prefer Dakota's style, but I feel like, whereas I feel like Dakota is more of a Roger Corman-esque director. I think of Fred Olen Ray as being almost more like a wild, throw it all up there in the screen, Russ Meyer type of director.
Yeah, that's actually a really good. I think the Russ Meyer Corman analogy is strong because I think Dakota has more of a visual sense for sure. Yeah, I think Fred Olen Ray is very happy to just plop the camera down wherever it seems like it would make the most sense and film a wide master of a scene, right. and then his work is done, kind of. Yeah. But I also think Fred Olen Ray has a clear very satirical sense of humor. I think I've enjoyed. I've never watched a Fred Olen Ray movie and been bored. That's for sure. Right. I think, and I suppose, and that's not true of Dakota. We'll talk about this near the end of the episode. But So I think Fred Olen Ray is one of those kind of like wild man directors of B movies, where you're not going to get like the best looking movie maybe, but
Right.
it's just going to be so strange and weird that you're going to have a good time. And this movie's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know, like, to the more mainstream viewer, they would probably categorize all these movies as campy. But, like, to me, I would say Fred Olen Ray, like, he knows he's intentionally riding a certain level of camp, and he's cool with it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Fred Olen Ray seems like, I know, like, these movies with, like, there's this, like, Charles Band connection. This is probably because, like, Full Moon was more of, like, an LA thing, right? And Troma's New York. But Fred Olen Ray seems like he might kind of fit in that Troma world a little bit more than Dakota would.
I agree with that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So this one is just, like, a little more wild with the plot. Like, I mean, we're basically just thrown right into it right away with this one, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a very short movie, and we're thrown right into it. It's actually a much more simple plot, oddly enough. Not that any of these are very complicated.
Yeah.
But this does a thing too that was really big at this time. I'm sure you remember this, even that you've been playing catch up on this era with some of these B movies. But this like era of like the mid to late 80s had a really big obsession with like a return to like film noir.
Yeah.
And like this kind of like, but also like always this kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek film noir, like a little bit meta about it. So our main character in this is a private detective named Jack Chandler, which right off the bat, like the name, and he's played by Jay Richardson, which again, if you've watched all these like or a lot of these B movies of this era, Jay Richardson is a guy you're gonna recognize. Pops up in a lot of these, especially a lot of like the Fred Olen Ray kind of stuff around this time. And he's been hired to track down a teenage runaway in LA, and that's kind of just like the through line. But we see right off the bat. I mean, the very first scene is what's this character's name? Laurie, right?
Yeah.
The first thing we see in the movie is like, the first thing we see in this movie is a character named Laurie, played by Dawn Wildsmith, who's already been like arrested and is basically telling the police, and she's basically being interviewed in limbo because this is a very cheap movie.
Yeah.
But she's telling the police about her story about why she's there, and it's kind of set up to make us think this is just a standard like prostitute bust. And then when she starts talking about how she used a special like kind of sexual device on the guy, they ask, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Here, I'll show you," and pulls out a chainsaw. Why they allowed a chainsaw to be in the interrogation room with her, don't worry about it.
Again, going completely wild.
Yeah. But that's our introduction to like, oh, okay, so this is going to be a very crazy movie. And then we move into the Jack Chandler stuff, and we get that standard film noir voiceover, but again, pretty jokey with him, where you have scenes like him. That's a later scene where he's with his girlfriend and talking about how when he had to leave his girlfriend, his voiceover is telling us how sad she was and how she was begging him to stay. And then we're seeing the reality where she's just like bitching him out and throwing stuff at him. Yeah. But yeah, cliched. But I what did you think of Jay Richardson in this as Jack Chandler? I mean, it's not like you can call it a great performance, but I think he's a fun character. And
I'll be honest with you. Like, I was kind of like, I had ordered a physical, because this is like one of the ones like as far as I could, like I search everything, you can't even rent it right now. So I was like, I tracked down the physical copy, and I was like waiting for it to get in their mail, and I watched the trailer on YouTube, and I was like, holy shit, I think I'm going to be all about this movie. Like, I love the look of it and everything. And then when I sat down to watch it, like the thing that like really sold it on to me is the like you said, the detective thing. And like that was weird too, because like I don't know if Blade Runner is what kicked that off, but then like later Trancers came, and so you kind of had like the sci-fi film noir, but then just like the regular film noir cir back, because I remember they did a series of TV movies in the late 80s, I think with Stacy Keach. They brought Mike Hammer back. And plus obviously there was stuff that was kind of film noirish a little bit on TV.
Like Armand Assante made a Mike Hammer TV movie too. They did like I Had a Jury again with him.
Wow. Yeah, like we had Crime Story and stuff. So I mean, it was really like you're saying, it really did.
Even remember? Do you remember the video game Sam and Max with like the dog that was like a cop, and he had like the bunny sidekick?
Yeah. I remember what you're talking about. Yeah. What was that a game for? Was that PC or what?
That was a PC game. That was an early PC game I had, but that was just like this, where it's like that, like you had the cliched voiceover noir stuff and that world, right? People loved exploring that kind of world around this time.
Yeah, I loved it, and I think definitely, one of our favorite directors, Rian Johnson. He probably wouldn't ever got to make Looper or Last Jedi if he didn't. Because like I remember when Brick came out, like people weren't like, oh, Rian Johnson. It was like, oh, film noir is back. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it is a genre that like it seems like every 20 years it makes like a little kind of temporary comeback, and people get excited about it, and then they just kind of drop it. You know.
I think it's always got its like cult following. I know, like if you're into like film, if you're into like noir detective like stories, like in the written sense, there's been a publishing house for quite a while now called Hard Case Crime that every month puts out like another book that's in that realm. A lot of them like reprints of like classic or lost books from like the 30s through 50s, but they also put out kind of some newer authors writing in that style still. Max Allan Collins is still writing new Mike Hammer books. So, I mean, it's still, I wouldn't say thriving, but I think it'll always have a fan base.
Yeah, Jay Richardson is Jack Chandler. It's pretty obvious, the reference there, you know what I mean? But no, like, I was all about it, and to be honest, like, not that I was, not that I wasn't excited to watch the movie anyway, because, like, you get Michelle Bauer, topless, hacking people with a chainsaw, like, I'm all about that craziness. But, yeah, like that level of like the film noir element, like it honestly, like it made the film like a whole new level of interest to me, like as opposed to if it was just like a generic, male nerd college character or whoever it could be, you know what I mean?
Well, right, because I think one of the most interesting things you can do with film noir is always butt it up against another genre. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Cast a Deadly Spell with Fred Ward.
No, we talked about that, but I still didn't.
It's on HBO Max.
Yeah, it's on the Max. Yeah, it's literally in my watch list, but I'm just so
definitely
swamped.
You're gonna love it. So definitely check it out. But that's like taking like a film noir world and mixing it with like black magic. And here, what starts as just a film noir. I mean, that's the thing is like it looks like it's just a film noir. Then you realize, okay, well, it's also about these women, these prostitutes are killing people with a chainsaw, and that's enough, right? That's enough for a B movie. And then to take it to the next level and say, well, actually, these women are involved with an Egyptian cult of people who worship chainsaws. Like now you're getting into like this is what we're talking about, the Fred Olen Ray thing, right? This is just like hat on a hat, but in a good way. Just keep taking it one step crazier every chance you get.
Yeah, and I had never seen this because, like I said, I never remember ever. Like, it's not like I stared at this on the video shelf and just always decided not to rent it. I never saw this in a video store ever. But I knew about this, like, really hardcore because of the Linnea Quigley thing in Fango, and I remember like there was quite a bit of excitement in the time, obviously because you had a chainsaw movie with Gunnar Hansen in it, and I remember that being like, and I remember the pictures very vividly in that issue of Fango. Still have it somewhere in a box somewhere, but like I remember that, and I remember like I always had the feeling that this movie was bigger budget than what it was because like in the magazines and shit they only ever showed stuff from the set that they have, the Egyptian like cult set, you know what I mean? So I thought it was going to be like a much bigger budget affair than it was, but no, like it totally worked for me. And like we kind of like I would say this movie's like a little bit looser in its plot and story. Like you said, it's just really the detective character figuring out what's going on, and we kind of the first 20-30 minutes or so we kind of bounce in between the murders, and then there's a besides Michelle Bauer, there's another woman in the cult that they show go kill another guy at his house.
By the way, I want to briefly talk about her because we talk about like these women who would just do a couple movies and kind of vanish. And I kind of looked into her and shit. I think she's in maybe a couple other Fred Olen Ray movies. But the name of the actress is Esther Elise, and she plays Lisa, who, as you just said, she's the other featured she has the other featured kill scene in this. I actually really liked her too. I found her like really cute.
Yeah, I did too.
She reminded me a lot of actually like kind of like physically like in the face or anything of Dana DiLorenzo, who played Kelly on Ash vs. Evil Dead. But yeah, I thought she was like really cute. And I was kind of watching this thinking like, oh, that's a shame that she's not in more of these, just because her brief presence in this is like, I like her.
She was really good. Speaking of Dana DeLorenzo, would somebody like at a production somewhere like let's make her the new Scream Queen, because I think she would do it
100%. She's so into it, and I know she still really wants to play Kelly again, and she's always like advocating for that show to come back, and she just seems like such a fun person. But she would have killed in this era.
Exactly. Yeah, but I want to talk about Esther Elise's kill scene because he's credited as something else. IMDb doesn't have the fake name, but here we get Fox Harris as Hermie. And I got a kick out of this because like I always just know this guy as like the crazy old scientist guy who's driving around in the car in Repo Man, which we just covered.
You just did that, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, it saddened me because I was like, oh yeah, like what else did Fox Harris do? And sadly, he died the year that this came out. He died a couple days after Christmas, 1988, of lung cancer. So like, I'm not sure if this was his final movie, but like, yeah, it's one of his.
It's not his final movie. He definitely had more stuff in the can because he has like looking at him now. He had a few movies that came out in '89 and even in the '90s. Still having stuff come out. Yeah,
but he was great. Like I don't know a whole lot about his background to be honest, but for the oddball character, I mean, obviously he was great in Repo Man, and like he's great, and he's actually a good actor. But like the oddball, whatever, like and like I always thought the voice he put on in Repo Man was like a put upon voice, but he kind of uses it again here, and I love it. Maybe that was by request, or maybe that was just his thing. But like when he has the girl posing with the baseball bat, and she keeps swinging it closer and closer to him, and he's taking photos of her, and he's like, "Why are you swinging it so close to me?" I just love it. It's great.
And that scene is filmed in Fred Olen Ray's apartment, which is it's a fun little detail that I know, and also it's like interesting to look at them, be reminded of like, oh, these people who are making these movies were living in these like little hole in the wall apartments and stuff in LA, right? But I love that he does the typical B movie thing of this time where he's got some of his previous movies on VHS displayed up on the mantle.
On the mantle, this guy in his 50s, Fox Harris is going to have a proudly display to everybody that comes to his house. His copy of Creepazoids on the mantle. Yeah, because they pulled that in Chopping Mall too. Wynorski, he's like the scene where they hole up in the pizza parlor. I'm going to have all the posters to all my previous direct-to-video movies up on the wall for no reason. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay,
it makes it look like it's like a Roger Corman pizzeria or something.
Yeah, exactly. Corman's Pizza.
I would eat there though.
Oh, I would too. But I guess we should say it's very similar to the opening, which we kind of glossed over. But they're like Michelle Bauer in the opening has this awesome scene where she picks up this kind of like construction worker type guy and takes him back to I think her place, and her place, and she has a painting of Elvis on the wall that she covers up before she chainsaws him. And basically the chainsaw scenes is very low budget, but I like it. I love the aesthetic and the kind of feel of it. Is you basically get a close-up of the girl topless or scantily clad, whatever they're wearing, and then like they're running the chainsaw, and then just somebody off screen is like throwing cups of blood onto them.
Yeah, and body parts.
And throwing rubber body parts at them.
You get like the good little gag too, where like the hand comes up and grabs her breast, and then she pulls the hand, and it's just a kind of like cut off arm. Like
yeah. That was great. Yeah. So those are kind of like the main chainsaw hooker scenes in the movie. And then we kind of, our detective guy, he kind of gets captured, and then we find out Linnea, who's part of the cult, like she's actually really not part of the cult. She's kind of like posing because she's trying to find out what happened to her friend, and she thinks the cult was responsible and whatnot. And I have to say, this is what I was talking about. This is where the movie really took up a notch, because when you get Linnea together with Jay Richardson, like I like that like weird chemistry they had, and they keep, like, it's kind of weird. Let me look at the description of this movie, but it's kind of weird, but they, Linnea Quigley was young when they did this movie, don't get me wrong, but they describe her in the plot summary on Wikipedia. It's like in the movie too, like they act like she's like a teenage runaway. Did you notice that?
Yeah, that's how she's listed, and that does make things again problematic, but whatever. Like,
whereas like if you just would have not saying you have to state the character's age or anything, but like if you just would have had her be quote unquote a young woman in the story, it wouldn't have mattered. You know what I mean?
I think he does ask her at one point in the movie though, how old are you? Doesn't he? I think she says 18.
Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah, so they kind of have something, and then this is where I thought it was like a little weird, because I always thought the girlfriend character of the detective was kind of like unnecessary. I thought it was just like they just wanted to have her around as window dressing, but then there's like a cool kind of friendship, partnership in this case, figuring this out thing that like a budding romance between the detective and Linnea. And then like the girlfriend shows up and sees what's going on and just like, just pretty much just bitches at the guy, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know, like I felt like we would have gotten to the story a lot cleaner, and we would have felt maybe the romantic sparks fly between Jay Richardson and Linnea Quigley a little bit better if we didn't have to have this girlfriend character kind of, because it kind of just turns him to a sleazeball, you know what I mean?
But this is what you're talking about earlier, and I don't know. Hopefully, nobody listens to this show would do this, but some people might hear this and roll their eyes at how we're talking about these women as like legit actresses. But I think the proof is in the pudding here. If you watch this movie right after Sorority Babes, this is like a very different performance from Linnea Quigley.
Oh yeah.
And a very different kind of character, and Michelle Bauer too. Like she's very different in this. Like she's much more kind of over the top comedic in this than she is. I mean, she's obviously still they're using her for a lot of nudity in this, but she's like much more. She's different, and Linnea's very different. So yeah, I like how they're getting to show off a lot of different sides of them. And I like you, I like the little relationship between Linnea and Jay Richardson in this.
Yeah, like
what else?
Yeah,
go ahead.
It just really carried the movie till we get to, the movie obviously is all about the finale, but their relationship.
But before we get to the finale, we should say we also have Dookie Flyswatter again.
Yeah, we got to talk about Dookie Flyswatter. And this was kind of like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is we have Jay Richardson, like he's figured out enough, he knows what's going on, so he makes a date with Mercedes, who's played by Michelle Bauer. And he knows he's going to become a victim. And they agree to meet in this bar, which is where she kind of picks up a lot of her victims. And we get Dookie Flyswatter. Dookie Flyswatter is the bartender. What was his name? Bartender Jake or something like that?
Yeah, Jake the bartender.
Yeah, Jake the bartender. And he's kind of a dick in this, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I'm also not ashamed to admit that I laughed out loud the first time I watched this movie when Chandler goes into the bar and it shows all the people at the bar, and one of them is just like a 9-year-old kid.
Yeah, smoking a cigarette,
smoking and drinking a beer with everyone else, and they never mention it's just like a little brief, like a side kind of joke, and I loved that. Yeah,
I loved it too. And it was awesome too, like when they order their drinks, it's within camera view. He doesn't even like go off camera. Dookie just goes behind the bar and he already has like 2 pre-poured drinks sitting there. And then Michelle Bauer comes in and they go and they sit at a table. And I thought it was like a funny thing because this is a scene where they're in the bar talking. Like, I feel like it would have been just as fine and maybe even worked better if the bar would have been like relatively empty and they just would have sat in like a quiet corner and had a conversation. But, to try to make the movie not seem so cheap, they kind of scatter a handful of extras around. So like on the tables to the next to them, you just get like these bored, what look like crew members just sitting around in the background of the shots.
Yeah.
But I really like that scene too because he was really playing it like the gumshoe detective and all that. But yeah, we never thought, but like Dookie Flyswatter, he's all scattered throughout these 3 films for sure.
Yeah, honestly, we could have just actually had this be a Dookie Flyswatter show, and it would have been the same 3 movies. We would have been fine.
Yeah, I've been wondering how to title this. I think I'm just going to go with Dookie Flyswatter retrospective. But yeah. So, basically, we have it, Linnea and Jay Richardson, they're going to take down the thing. And it's this is where, it gets a little wonky here, what you say, when, how they figure out, she kind of knows where the lair is, but not really. And then, it kind of just turns into a gag, how they find the place.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's kind of full of that kind of stuff, right? It's that old school kind of easy gag of, I don't know how we're going to find it, and then just instantly driving by a sign that says, Egyptian temple through here. Exactly. And the fact that it's, written on a cardboard sign,
Yeah.
And then, the idea of, and again, this goes to, the budget of the film, right? I know, they filmed this entire movie, and I can't remember the name of the studio, but it was, some studio a lot of these productions in L.A. were using at the time. And I remember hearing Jay Richardson talk about this I think it's in that documentary where he basically says, apartment set was one side of the studio and the temple was the other side, and they're just rushing back and forth. And it's even when they go into the temple for the first time, they're clearly walking through the entrance to a warehouse, right?
Yeah.
All this crap just laying all over the place and stuff.
Yeah, they're in Van Nuys or City of Industry or just somewhere crappy with some warehouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they go in there and it's pretty much what you think would happen. It's they kind of get captured and
we haven't talked about. We should talk about Gunnar Hansen as the master.
Yeah,
the guy who runs
he's kind of for lack of a better term, he kind of just masturbates in the bushes while the girls are doing their killings. He's not really a shot caller as the head of the cult, and I'm sure this had to do with they probably didn't have too many days to film with him, so it's not really like you get him sprinkled throughout the movie commanding that the girls go out and kill. It's just when they do kill, there's like literally like a shot of him in the bushes nearby, like lurking and being menacing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly there because they eventually just want the shot of Gunnar Hansen holding a chainsaw, and they want him on the cover to say, hey, it's Gunnar Hansen in our chainsaw movie.
Right.
And I would say he kind of underplays the role a little bit, but I don't know if you feel this way, Goat. It was kind of, I liked seeing him in this. I actually do like him in this, even though it's not like, I wouldn't call it an incredible performance or anything.
Yeah.
But the thing I've always felt about Gunnar Hansen, and I discovered this when I first got Texas Chainsaw Massacre back on Laserdisc back in the day and listened to the audio commentary, Gunnar Hansen just has such a soothing, pleasant voice.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about listening to him where you can just tell how actually, and I've always heard this, he's not one that unfortunately I was never able to meet, and unfortunately he's passed now.
Yeah.
But every story you hear about him was just like what a great, gentle guy he was. And I think that just comes across in his presence. So it's interesting to see and know that he was Leatherface, and then to see him play like this killer here. But there's just something about his voice that I like. I don't know. I'm glad he's in this.
No, for sure. And yeah, I always heard like the best things about him. I kind of knew a guy who made a couple low budget movies in the late 90s, early 2000s, and one of the movies he made, he had Gunnar Hansen in it, and he just raved and raved about like the experience he had, working with Gunnar, and how just much of a nice guy is. And like I read stories, and I remember somebody saying like they met him at like pretty much like a flea market type situation doing autographs, and like he was just like the coolest guy, and would sign anything you want to sign and take pictures with you and stuff. And like I think he was kind of doing that like on his own as a way to like, make some bucks, like really even before the horror convention shit started, to be honest with you. But like, yeah, I mean, it just, and he had done some other movies. Like, you ever see that Mosquito movie he was in?
Oh yeah. I've seen Mosquito.
Yeah. I actually, that actually was one I did find on the shelf of the mom and pop video store.
There was are you familiar with Chainsaw Sally at all?
Nah, like just the title, but that's it.
Yeah. So like Chainsaw Sally is kind of like, I think the movie's from like, the movie's are from the early 2000s. Let me see if I can, 2004.
Okay.
Chainsaw Sally is a character. Jimmy O'Burl is the writer and director, and his wife, April Burl, plays Chainsaw Sally. And they did like one movie, and then they actually spun that off into a Chainsaw Sally TV show that they were kind of doing on the web, and they did like 2 seasons of that and then a special, and then they actually had signed a deal with El Rey to do an animated series.
Wow.
And unfortunately that never happened, and of course now El Rey is going away, and I think they're still trying to make a 3rd season of the show. But anyways, the original movie, Gunnar Hansen's in that as Chainsaw Sally's dad, which of course, again, right, like if we're going to make a movie about a character with a chainsaw killer, who can we have play the dad? And same general idea, let's bring him in, but he seems to actually be enjoying being there. And then again, I've heard on the commentary they talk about like how nice he was and like what a kind of father figure he became on the set in real life. So yeah,
for
good
sure.
guy.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. Like, I mean, he did do stuff, obviously, after Texas Chainsaw, which, I mean, obviously we should say, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, like, this giant thing in the world, but it really wasn't when they made it. It was, like, almost like a student film type situation. And, like, yeah, he obviously did other stuff throughout the years, but, like, yeah, I wish he could have, like, he kind of could have cashed in a little more and, like, been in, like, some more prestigious projects, because he was such, like, kind of a cool and enigmatic guy, and, like, like obviously, maybe it's just that thing of like his most famous role was something where he wore a mask and whatever, but like just him as a person, like I agree completely. Like even this movie, in all honesty, like you kind of like, it's cool that he's there, and it's like, I know what you're saying, like if you're gonna do it, might as well get him, but like you kind of feel like he's wasted at the same time, or at least I did when I watched it.
Yeah.
Like in all honesty, that's probably the only real negative I have about the movie. It's just kind of like, you kind of feel like, it's kind of a missed opportunity. But like I don't really even know how to describe like the last final kind of bit of this.
Well, we get to
goes nuts.
They've been captured, and they tie up Jack Chandler, and they kind of like they kind of like brainwash Linnea Quigley into like rejoining the cult, because then we get, of course, the famous virgin dance of the dueling double chainsaws, where if you've seen pictures of Linnea in this, it's probably this sequence, because she's actually inside a tomb, which apparently this is the tomb from Vamp, and it still has like Grace Jones's like face on it. But when they open the tomb, she's in there fully nude, but kind of body painted.
Yeah.
In a way where I've read about how they would sometimes show this movie on TV and like not realize she was naked and
Right.
not crop this at all, because you can kind of look at it like probably especially in bad resolution, you know.
Yeah, well, I want to say Fangoria showed pictures of her like that, and I never realized it wasn't some type of thing that she was wearing. Like, it looked like some type of like wraparound cloth thing.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Thankfully, once you have the Blu-ray, it's a little more.
you know, once the Blu-ray, you can see the nipples, everything, yeah, for sure. But like I have to say, like the whatever you want to call it, body painting, like it's really well done.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to point out for a fun little detail for anyone who takes our advice and goes and watches this afterwards. Apparently, because of the way the scene is shot, she had to start the chainsaws up while she was in the tomb. And of course, you know, chainsaws produce smoke. Yeah. And the smoke started to fill the tomb, and she started to get lightheaded. And you can notice that when they open the tomb and she steps out, she actually stumbles because she's kind of like she was like losing consciousness in there.
Yikes. Yeah, like, do you know really like what's up with the chainsaws in this movie? Like, are they really running? Are they bladeless? Like, what do they do?
I was like looking at it. Doesn't it look like they do have the blades? I was like kind of constantly surprised that they had the women actually swinging around what looked to me to be just fully running chainsaws. I mean, maybe there is like some kind of trick to it, but because you can often tell in movies, especially in low budget movies, when they remove the chain,
right,
and they remove the blade, and like that, they always looked like fully like equipped on it to me in this one. But
yeah, it was hard to tell, like, because it looked real, but then it was just like you just in your mind you're thinking it can't be, right? Like, you know. Good
thing we were talking about Linnea Quigley getting in that shape and being toned, because she has to swing two of these things around during this dance sequence.
Yeah, chainsaws are even smaller chainsaws are, you know, that's why they kind of miniaturized them over the years. It's like they're very hard to wield, like even for a man, you know. But yeah, so like it gets a little wild here. There's kind of like I picked up on this. There's kind of like the other members of the cult, or maybe the less experienced members of the cult. There's kind of like this like chorus of girls that are sitting there mesmerized watching this go on. Did you pick up on this? Like,
yeah, actually, I don't know how much you looked into the trivia on this one, but the chorus of girls are apparently real prostitutes, or at least they think they might have been, because Fred Olin Ray, the way he tells the stories, he just had some people, you know, some of the PAs like go out and rustle up women, and he says he believes that they just brought back like real streetwalkers that they found on LA and brought them in. And I think he talks. I can't remember like the details, but I think he just says the basically the way they were presenting themselves on set is what led him to believe that.
Yeah.
So use your imagination, I suppose. But
yeah, they just stood out to me because like you know, especially next to like, you know, obviously, you know, Linnea, Michelle, and whatever, like they kind of stood out like a sore thumb to me, because I was like, oh, they kind of seem like they roped in some non-actors into the production.
Yeah, they have that like kind of, I don't want to be, again, I'm not trying to be mean, but they have that look of maybe someone who's been leading a life on the streets of LA for a while.
Yeah, I just kind of thought they were like strippers or something that had no acting experience, because they're kind of like, and there's a one girl, it's kind of like, I don't know if you would call it overreacting, but just acting strange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, like what did you feel about the end kind of wrap up? Like, I mean, not that I expect the world out of these movies, but I was a little bit like kind of underwhelmed. Like,
well, yeah, we should just say, so we eventually get like, you know, the big, I guess, centerpiece of the finale is a chainsaw fight between Michelle Bauer and Linnea Quigley, which again it's definitely not as exciting as maybe, you know, like the Nicolas Cage chainsaw fight in Mandy, or even the Dennis Hopper versus Leatherface. But I mean, you're seeing two hot women, you know.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Chainsaws at each other. It is what it is. The actual final scene you're talking about, the wrap up, I think was unnecessary. I think this is a movie that could have just went with like a hard cut at the end of like the actual temple stuff. I don't think we needed like the little postscript, but.
Yeah, I guess we should give them some credit. They did try to dress up the kind of production values, because wasn't there that lady that came out and like swallowed fire and spit it and all that? Yeah,
they're showing off some stuff. That's the kind of thing where like just bringing your friends to do whatever talents you know they have. So they can,
that's kind of how it was fun, but that's kind of how it felt. But yeah, there's like the wrap up scene, and like I'm kind of blanking. Like the last part I remember is when Linnea kind of falls into his arms, and they kind of like.
Well, but then we get where it says "coming soon, student chainsaw nurses."
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is a flat out lie. They never made that. But
yeah, I was going to ask you about that. If you knew for sure, was that just a gag, or were they like literally legit being like, "Oh, we could make this if this does well"?
I mean, I assume it's a gag. In the documentary we keep referencing, Fred Olen Ray talks about how he would never do a sequel now because he feels like the reason people like the movie is because it's retro, and he thinks it would be silly to go back and try and revisit it. But I don't know if that means that at the time he didn't want to do a sequel. I mean, right. I would imagine, like most of the movies at this time, I would imagine this definitely made them money. So I don't know what would have prevented them from doing a second one if they wanted. But you also have to think, like, someone like Fred Olen Ray, he probably had 20 more movies to make over the next few months. So, yeah.
Yeah, like, do you think, like with the Sorority Babes and the Slimeball, Bowl-O-Rama, now Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, these are some of the most the more outrageous titles of this time. Do you think that these titles like really kind of generated revenue, like with rentals or more stores want to carry it? Because it's just
I guarantee they did. Yeah. I mean, first of all, these movies, I think both Sorority Babes and Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers were also sold to be shown on USA Up All Night. Yeah. And so you get revenue from that. And then I'm guaranteeing these were videos that were doing well in video stores. So I'm sure. I mean, I don't think anybody got rich off of these, but I think these were definitely movies that were consistently making money for the people who are involved.
Yeah, I'm sure they help pay the rent for a month or two. That's how I always look at, even like the stars of these movies, they probably made their rent for that month, maybe half the rent for the next month off their participation.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, the actors, I'm sure, are making like nothing. Yeah. But that's the thing is, that's why when you look back, when you look up these directors and these actresses, you will see how many movies they would make in a year, and that's a part of it, right? Yeah. Like that's what you had to do.
Yeah, like I was I wouldn't even really need it to really be a chainsaw related type thing, but I was kind of like all about the duo of Jay Richardson, Linnea Quigley. Like I would have loved to see like, even if it wasn't like the direct sequel, just like something where like they were working a case together. You know what I mean? Like she could be the one who kind of does like the undercover work for him and, kind of poses as different characters or whatever. And like he's whatever, because I thought they were really good together, honestly.
Yeah. Now, we should point out that Brinke Stevens is not in this one.
No.
And I actually wanted to read, just because I thought this was funny, I jotted it down. On the audio commentary of Sorority Babes in the Slimeball, Bowl-O-Rama, Brinke Stevens talks about how she remembers when her two friends, Linnea and Michelle, were doing this movie. And I just wrote this quote down because I thought it was so funny, and it's indicative of this era and everything we're talking about with them. Is she said, she's talking about why she didn't do this one. And she says, well, I can't do a movie called Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. My mom would kill me. So anyway, I was doing Slave Girls Beyond Infinity. And I just loved that like instant, like, you know, not even realizing what she's just said, but I just thought that was so funny.
That is funny. It definitely, like, the movie definitely would have like been cool if she was in it, but I don't really know who she would have played other than.
Yeah, I feel like if she was there, she would have replaced Esther Elise.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I can think of.
But then we wouldn't have the awesome Esther Elise. So.
Yeah.
So the last movie we're going to talk about here, 1988, is Nightmare Sisters.
And we should say, I just to lead into that, to point out, so as you said, Fred Olen Ray and David Dakota were friends, and they were kind of like, they would recommend actors to each other, kind of sharing, crew and equipment, I believe. And we should point out, because this is important to the story, that Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers was made in just 5 days. They filmed it in 5 days. And apparently the story of Nightmare Sisters is that David Dakota then bet Fred Olen Ray, I bet I could make a movie in 4 days. And that movie is Nightmare Sisters.
Yeah, and I gotta say, besides that little part of it, there's like another story behind this. Was like, whatever company handled the distribution only made a really limited number of video cassettes, and then like they went out of business. So like, unfortunately, this movie, and like I thought this one was going to be like the dud out of the group, just because I never heard of it. And yeah, like, and the reason I never heard it was like the distributor just went out of business, and like it didn't really get it like its just due the way the other films did. But I gotta say, Trev, like this one, and it was actually, I wish I would have done it this way, but because I thought this might be the dud or the lesser of whatever, I actually watched this one first, and this was actually kind of my favorite, in all honesty.
Really? Cool.
So it's like with this movie, you definitely get the feeling that it is, because like how you said, like they're trying to make it quick, and supposedly they also used, like, to shoot it, they used mostly leftover film that they had from Sorority Babes and some other
short ends.
So then, like, they reused a lot of the same crew and the cast members, But yeah, like this movie just had a charm to it that like right from the beginning, and like I don't know if it's because they were stretching for time or they just had a slightly different approach with it. But I love the idea. I think it's a brilliant idea that like this is a total nerd movie. That we weren't just going to have like, and it is kind of a carbon copy of Sorority Babes. Like you have three guys who are nerd guys, kind of like lesser known actors. They weren't as recognizable as the nerd guys in Slimeball. But you kind of have the three nerd guys, but then we also make our three screen queens complete nerds. Mm-hmm. So like the movie starts out is basically Brinke Stevens is coming home. She's a complete nerd, glasses, like, you know, she's dressed just like one of the guys would be from Revenge of the Nerds pretty much. Linnea, I gotta say, I didn't recognize Linnea at first, and then she started talking. I'm like, shit, that's Linnea's voice. She kind of has like this frazzled, like weird hair, and they have like dentures on her, to where she has buck teeth, and like they didn't really look like cartoon like Elmer Fudd teeth, but they kind of like I just thought it was a girl with like buck teeth, honestly. And finally, I was like, oh shit, that's Linnea. And then Michelle Bauer comes in. And, like, I guess technically she was wearing a fat suit, but she didn't, like, look super, super large to me, just with her character.
Yeah, there's one outfit later where they pull it off a little bit better. The outfit she's wearing when the guys come over makes her look bigger, because she's wearing, it's, like, more kind of, like, moo-moo-esque.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one, she's just wearing, like, basically, like a workout suit that it seems like they've stuffed with stuff.
Yeah. So she's supposed to be, like, the nerdy girl who's, like, overweight, yeah. And like I guess to kind of like whatever tie in the theme, whatever is like they make this a sorority, right? Where everybody else is just out of town this weekend or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's so obviously like a smaller house and not a sorority house. You know what I mean?
It's just some house that they had like that's the thing is like they had the short ends. They had a span of like 4 days. And this was actually a house that belonged to a friend of Dakota's who he was moving out of. And he said, hey, the house is going to be kind of like empty for these 4 days before I move out. Do you want to make a movie here? And so that's kind of the backstory of this film. I mean, to go to what you just said and the fact that they play as nerds, I will say this isn't my favorite of the three, but I do think this is probably the best showcase for them as performers, right? Because
big time.
You do get them playing these nerd characters, and I will say, like, again, like, roll your eyes all you want, but I think these are like genuinely good comedic performances from all three of them, and like impressive in this level of film that, you know, there's an early scene where it's just the three of them. Again, it's like just a master, you know, one wide shot of the three of them on a couch talking, and it's like a 5 or 6 minute scene, no cuts.
No cuts. There's no cuts. Their acting is good. Not only do they not fuck up the lines, but
they're
like
genuinely funny.
Like I was really into the scene because I guess we should say, let's get back the cold open of the movie. Let's be honest. It's a little brutal. It's a little brutal.
But our boy's back.
Yeah, our boy, the man of 1,000 voices, Dookie Flyswatter. He plays like a medium. He has a crystal ball. Like this lady comes because her husband is missing, feared dead, whatever. Well, actually, they know he's dead. They just found a pile of ashes in a whatever bed. And so Dookie Flyswatter, he does like the medium thing where he contacts a spirit. And it's very odd, very strange, this character that Dookie Flyswatter's playing here. The only way I could describe it is like I'm pretty sure like a young Hank Azaria rented this movie the night before he went and did his audition for The Simpsons, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, or his character in Mystery Men.
Yeah.
The Blue Raja. Yeah. So he's got the turban, and he's definitely doing that kind of voice.
Yeah, definitely. This would not fly nowadays.
No.
So basically, Dookie Flyswatter, you know, he's using the crystal ball. It turns out, like, he describes this scene of what happened to this lady's husband. It was a succubus. A female demon that killed her husband, turned him into ash. He describes that, you know, she bit his penis and that made him turn into ash. And then like things go wrong, like he can't control the mystic forces that are going on. And in a very strange special effect, Dookie Flyswatter gets beheaded, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. And by beheaded, we mean you can see his shoulders in the black turtleneck that he's wearing. Because, like, it honestly, Trev, this effect would have worked if they wouldn't have had a light on in the background that would have showed the silhouette of his shoulder.
Yeah, it's overlit for sure.
Yeah, because
and again, I wonder, like, we're watching this on Blu-ray. Like, maybe if you'd seen this on a bad VHS, you would have been like, oh, it's not too bad, you know.
Because it's basically like the head floating on front of a black background, which where like, all you see is the head. Looks like it's floating, you know. And,
like, I've seen other movies pull that trick off much better.
Right. So yeah. Dookie Flyswatter with his very convincing accent there, but I give the guy credit. He when he does his characters, whatever in these movies, he goes full force. He's over the top. He goes all the way with it. Mm-hmm. So basically, where that translates into our movie about the female nerds meeting male nerds is Brinke Stevens like just did some junk shopping, and somehow she bought for a couple bucks Dookie Flyswatter's crystal ball. So. And I'm actually glad that the crystal ball like kind of like stayed out of the movie for a while, but like basically the nerds, the male nerds I should say, they get invited over to have a party with the female nerds, and it's basically like nerd on nerd, and like the male nerds like they're a little stuck up because like we said like. I mean, I don't know, like I found this like a little unbelievable, Trev, that these male nerds were like sticking their nose up in the air, like they're making fun of Linnea's buck teeth and Michelle Bauer, they call her a cow and all these sort of things. Like, I think in real life, these nerds would be happy to be with any girls, don't you?
Oh, for sure. Especially since these three, like, you can only like nerd them up so much. They still look pretty cute, you know, and it's like they're definitely still catches, especially for these guys. So
yeah, it's like, oh, Brinke Stevens has glasses on. Come on. But what I will say to that is, as ridiculous it is trying to ugly up these three ladies, they commit 100% full force to the characters, where like you kind of do believe that they are like that nerdy. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like. It's not like movies now where it's not like, you know, She's All That or whatever, where Rachel Lee Cook puts her hair up in a bun and you're supposed to like, you know what I mean?
No, and this is the thing too. This is, again, sometimes you can just tell in movies when the performers are so happy to have these roles and they're just having so much fun. And I think it's like that. And I think you can tell the three of them are genuinely friends. Like, it all just like convalesces together, or coalesces together, I should say. That's the right word. But coalesces together, and like, that's why I say it's like a great showcase for the three of them. Is it's like I don't think any of them were expecting to be asked to play characters like this, and they're just living it up. And and you watch this and go like, wow, these three girls, like, they legit had comedic talent. Like, that's the thing, is we'll talk in a minute again about like where they went after this, but it is a shame that like Hollywood wasn't willing to use them in like bigger ways, because I think you could have put them into mainstream comedies. I think we see that here.
Yeah. I mean, I think either three of them could have at least been in a Pauly Shore movie. You know what I mean? Like,
I think of like, so Linnea Quigley, I know she went on to do like the Vice Academy movies, and it's just like, you think of that, and I mean, those are obviously like exploitation ripoffs of Police Academy, but why couldn't she just been in Police Academy? Like, they're good enough for that level of film for sure, and even beyond probably. But.
Exactly. So kind of like the B plot too is like, while this nerd party's going on, there's like some frat bros, because these nerds are somehow trying to, like you said, get in the fraternity, and like they basically brag that they're going to these girls' party, and like, so basically their frat bros are kind of like lurking nearby, looking through the windows, seeing what's going on. And basically what happens is, when this movie gets really going, is, you know, part of the party is they bring out the crystal ball and they kind of unleash the demonic force, you know, the succubus force, and like all three of the nerdy girls are instantly transformed into like three super hot like succubuses. So like, you know, Michelle Bauer is not quote unquote fat anymore. Also too, did you notice Michelle Bauer, when she was playing fat, like they had like cotton balls or something stuffed in her cheeks?
yeah, the old trick. Yep.
Yeah. And Linnea's, you know, denture teeth are gone, and Brinke Stevens pretty much, you know, her glasses are gone.
Takes off her glasses.
Yeah. And I gotta say, like, and this to me, Trev, like, proves that this was actually good acting. I actually was pretty disappointed. I'll be honest. I was pretty disappointed when they weren't the nerd girls anymore, because I like those characters. Like, I wish there were.
Although the one who still gets to have some fun with it is Brinke Stevens, which is nice, because she was the one who was missing from the last movie, and we said was not used that well in the first one. This is kind of like her moment to shine here in this one, because she gets to do the nerdy performance, and then when she becomes like sexy, she gets to put on like another affectation where she plays like a sexy girl pretending to be a young girl to like role play with the guys, and she does that really well too.
The kind of like you know, kind of little girl dress with a big lollipop.
Yeah.
Which like, like hers, I was kind of like, oh yeah, like, you know, her character still is, like you said, is still kind of a fun, interesting character. Whereas Linnea Michelle kind of just become like sexy, whatever, demons, whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she kind of gets to be that. But I mean, to talk about again how times have changed. Like, I don't think you could portray like a, whatever you want to call it, a sexual fantasy figure as a little girl in a movie now.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I'm sure that's, it's still a thing I'm sure gets role played, but she like really goes for it. And I think like her that affectation she picks up is like really funny. Linnea Quigley does get another big highlight moment though, where she gets to actually do a full musical number, where she performs the song Santa Monica Boulevard Boys, and it's interesting to know that that's actually a song from her actual punk band, The Skirts, which again, like Linnea Quigley is a pretty cool person, and if you need more proof, like there's the fact that not only is she a scream queen, but she had an LA punk band.
Exactly. So yeah, so it's kind of like they all break off with their nerd guy that they're paired up with, and like things get like interesting and seductive. But like, the guys are like, what I thought was interesting was the guys were kind of just like at first are like, we know this is weird, we know this is wrong, we know this is like a supernatural thing that's going on, but let's just go with it because these girls are hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then there's like a certain level where it starts getting like more out of control, where these nerd guys really can't handle it, and like they kind of like, oh, we got to do something about this, we got to figure out how to turn them back because this ain't right, and they kind of pull back. They don't go the whole 9 yards. They don't have sex with them or anything like that.
It is good. You don't expect a movie like Nightmare Sisters to have you asking deep philosophical questions, but you do find yourself wondering watching this, like, would I, if I knew there was like some dark magic here, but I had a nude Brinke Stevens or Michelle Bauer inviting me into a bedroom, how do I react to that?
Exactly. And then this is where their like big bully frat bros come into play, because like they basically kidnap the nerds and lock them up in a shed, and then they go into like, we're gonna have sex with these hot girls, you know what I mean? And then like that's when we really get into the which I thought was a nice little switcheroo, that you don't really have to sacrifice any of your main male characters, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, they kind of send in the frat bros, and they go in, being the big studs they are, and they all get killed. And like we said, there's an interesting way, and we see it firsthand here, is like basically like they get you naked. They all of a sudden out of nowhere they'll have these sharp, jagged demon teeth, and they bite you in the penis. And I quite like didn't understand this, Trev, but like when they bite you in the penis, like you turn into ash.
Yeah, like smoke rises and you just like evaporate. I mean, maybe that is. I mean, I probably would want to die and turn into ash at that point. Yeah. So who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, like I think out of these movies, Sorority Babes, it's like, if you're going to die, you might as well like get raped to death by Michelle Bauer. And in this one, like same thing. It's and that's where these movies are like, I'd say somewhat linked, is like they have like a little bit of similarity in terms of like when the women turn evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, in this one, it was even like the original title was Sorority Succubus Sisters, which I wish it actually still had, because not only is it a more memorable title, but that would like link it more to Sorority Babes and the Slimeball, Bowl-O-Rama. So
exactly. So yeah, like this movie just really, like I said, just really caught me off guard, and like as a movie, it's definitely the cheapest. And everything.
I mean, you can tell it's just all in this one house, and it's
But basically, getting to see all three of the women play like basically dual roles, you know what I mean? And so like basically the way it wraps up is like once all the frat bros kind of get killed, is the nerds like they call like how do they know this guy? Like I can't remember, was it a phone book or like he's like a TV exorcist or something like that?
One of them knows him for some reason, but I can't remember why. Yeah.
So they call him, and we get introduced to this older character, this exorcist guy, and like let's see.
Should have been Buck Flower.
But, it should. That would have been
everything.
Awesome. Like Jim Culver as the Exorcist. So it's just literally like almost a take on the Exorcist. He shows up in the kind of like almost like the priest garb type thing. Although I'm not
kind of looks like Leslie Nielsen a little bit.
Yeah, like that type of guy, older guy, and like he pretty much does the exorcism on them, like it looks like it's gonna go like whatever, okay, and then like it gets complicated, because then like the actual, what would you say, like the actual demon I guess comes out.
Yeah, it's like it's the succubus, and it's basically just like a mannequin, like a mannequin with some like special effects makeup. But I think it's actually, from what I remember hearing, I think it's a prop flipped over for another movie, which would obviously happen a lot at this point. But it's like this like
it's kind of like a low budget version of the guy from the new Creep Show series, wouldn't you say?
You know what it kind of looks like? It kind of looks like when Gina Davis in Beetlejuice like rots, like near the end when he like makes them like kind of actually appear as corpses. That's what it looks like a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like a sheet for clothing type thing, a hood and whatever. And it kind of like I was actually, because like up until this point, this movie's been fairly low budget. I was actually kind of impressed by the mannequin. In all honesty, I was like, oh, I didn't kind of see this coming. I thought this was just kind of and I mean, definitely out of the three films, this one, because it is the lowest budget, it definitely does have like the most homemade feel to it, but I feel like it still has a charm because it's still so well done with the actresses.
Well, that's the thing. This one is like, on every level, this one's like barely a movie, and it's the cheapest one. But then you compare this to like the kind of like cheapo homemade stuff that we were getting in the 2000s and around now, right? And this is like so much more entertaining. Yeah. And just like you said, it has just so much more charm to it. Yeah. And again, this is another one where this was good enough to where they were able to actually put this on regular TV. Did you get a chance to watch the regular TV version of this?
No, I didn't.
So the Blu-ray has a version of this where, because obviously there's many nude scenes, including one of the longest like bathtub scenes you'll ever see in this kind of movie. The three of them are just washing each other in the bathtub for a very long time. But they wanted to show this on USA Up All Night, which we've mentioned multiple times already in this episode. And what they had to do is they had to go back, like I think a few months later when they sold this, and they brought the three actresses back, and they refilmed all their nude scenes now in with lingerie or bathing suits on. But it's funny because obviously they didn't have that house anymore, so like whenever you cut to them, it doesn't match. And it's like their hair is a little different. It's different picture quality because I think maybe those scenes were even done on video instead of film. It's interesting to watch. Obviously, it would not be anyone's preferred version to watch, but I'm glad it's on the Blu-ray just because it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I had heard about that. Maybe it was on the documentary where they said they had to go back and reshoot that scene. Do you know exactly like how much later they had to do that? Was it like years later?
I don't know if it was years later. I think it might have been like 6 months to a year, I want to say. I don't know what the exact timeline is. I know the funniest example of it, though, is that during the bathtub sequence, instead of being in the bathtub when they cut to them then, when the guys are peering in the little keyhole, it's the three of them in underwear playing with balloons on a bed.
That's right. Yeah, it was some kind of like bad thing. But I was just curious, like USA Up All Night, because you take these movies that by themselves are all various lengths, and then obviously you want to insert commercials in it to pad out the runtime. But then like movies like this where like some stuff has to get cut out so much, like I wonder if some episodes of Up All Night had more commercials, or like would like Rhonda just have to do longer segments for the movies that really got like chopped apart, you know what I mean?
Well, I think what I remember too, I don't think USA Up All Night had I don't think the movies had to fit into a certain amount of time either. I think it was just like they would show more movies if they needed to or whatever, or it would just like end at random times. Yeah. Because I was actually recently reading about USA Up All Night because watching these movies got me going down a rabbit hole of it and watching a bunch of clips of it on YouTube and stuff. And I was reading about how like sometimes USA Up All Night would just end at like 6 a.m. and sometimes it would end earlier. So I think it's just whatever worked out once you did it. There's that like that classic, a classic I should say, but there's that great like David Spade joke from one of his stand-up routines where he talked about watching movies like this on USA growing up and how it was always the same thing. We were watching a movie and they're like three guys walking through a forest saying, "Hey, let's all go to that boob festival," and then suddenly just a hard cut and them walking out of it saying, "That was a great boob festival," because you couldn't see it.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
You would watch some movies on USA Up All Night, and that was genuinely frustrating. And then you had the ones like this where the movie's still fun. And then the cool thing about that was then you would like see that you would be introduced to these films on USA Up All Night. I saw a lot of horror movies for the first time on Monster Vision with a lot of the gore cut out. You'd still like the movie, and then you get to track down the full version of it. Like that's another fun experience from my youth that is kind of gone now.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Watching a movie, and like for me, it was like because I didn't really watch. Well, I didn't have cable for a while, but like just on regular TV, they always watch the movies on Sunday afternoon. Like the independent stations would fill like a huge block. They pretty much do like 3 movies in a row, and so I always catch these movies. I'd be like, "Oh, that's really awesome," whatever, and then you like realize, "Oh, like it was probably cut to shit." So then I would go rent them again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that was fun. So so basically they have the showdown, and like you have a little bit of like the cartoon effects with the dummy. And, it's all kind of comic in a way, and it gets kind of doesn't get put back in the crystal ball.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's
and then they smash the ball, yeah.
right. And then it's funny too, because like I think it's like in the crystal ball in the backyard, and like they smash it or whatever they do, and then they just go right back to playing like Twister. That's pretty much how the movie ends.
Yeah, and then like the ultimate, like, again, the kind of thing that always happens in these kind of '80s movies is like the girl's no longer possessed, but as like a reward for our hero guys, the girls still get to retain their rockin' hard bodies. You know, they don't go back to being like their previous nerdy selves.
Yeah, so I mean, Brink was pretty much the same. She just wasn't, you know, wearing glasses and nerdy clothes. But like, yeah, definitely, Michelle Bauer gets to be thin, you know, permanently, and then Linnea's teeth get fixed. So like, I don't know, like. I mean, I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but I was a little taken back, because here's where I thought it was going, Trev. Was like, okay, the nerds, they got the hot versions of the girls for a little while, but they realized how dangerous it was. I thought the women were going to get turned back into their nerdy like look, but I thought like the kind of moral of the story was the nerd guys were going to just now accept them for how they were and like them still. I
think that's what you would do today.
Yeah.
But I think in the 80s, people didn't care. And I think the mentality back then was like, no, let's make sure they're still hot at the end.
And so what you're saying is in the 80s, people just wanted to jerk off, right?
Yeah, for sure. The 80s is, you know, materialism ruled in the 80s. So
yeah, but I don't know, man. Like I don't know how or why to explain how much I liked them playing the three nerds, but I thought it was awesome. I could have, like I said, I could have watched I could have just watched literally a movie called Nerd Party of them being nerds. I thought it would have been funny. Like I got a blast out of it. So yeah, so Nightmare Sisters definitely, you know. Definitely was a highlight for me. But I mean, all three of these movies were so much fun to look back on, you know, especially to kind of watch them in a block like this, you know.
Yeah, I think like it's these three together. I think you could just make a night of it because they're all very short. I mean, they're none of these are even 90 minutes. They're all like around 75 to 80 minutes.
Yeah.
Very quick watches, really fun. As you said, very different performances from all of them. You know, similar themes, but kind of different, you know, approaches. And as we said, just so indicative of an era I miss and like a special time in history for people like around our age. And I think people younger would find it just cool for like the retro aspect of it. Like, not even if you didn't grow up with this stuff, just, you know, the movies like this don't exist anymore. You know, you still have Troma's still cranking it out, I guess, and Full Moon's still going, but their output's not really exactly the same. Like I guarantee when Sorority Babes 2 does happen, it's going to have a different feel to it than the original one. For sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the downside is you know, there is this type of, there's like people are trying to make this type of film, but unfortunately it's not necessarily with the same resources or the same level of talent either behind or in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm. Or you're getting the typical thing where the people are making them, or people grew up on these ones and they think like, oh, I'll try to make a bad movie. And that's not really what these guys were doing. Fiddle and Ray and David Dakota weren't trying to make bad movies. They were trying to make fun movies. And that's an important distinction. They were making fun movies with limited resources, but then using those limited resources to their advantage to come up with just crazy ideas and stuff. And that's much different than being like, let's make a shitty movie on purpose.
Well, I got to ask you that too, Trev, is with the whole recent, whatever you want to call it, ironic filmmaking trend, making a shitty movie on purpose, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, obviously, you know, growing up in the 80s, I mean, like, people know, they've heard us, like we enjoy even things as tame as Mr. Boogity. But, like, I feel like the new ones where they try to make these shitty exploitation movies, like, they're not quote-unquote hardcore enough. Like, they don't have the violence, they don't have the gore, they don't have the nudity. So it's like if you're not going to go all the way with it, what's the point of even doing it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously exceptions to the rule. I think there's some, you know, there's always diamonds in the rough, and I think people like Astron 6 in recent years, and you know, some other like a movie like Turbo Kid. I think there's still ones that happen where people are going for it, and it turns out the right way. But I agree. I think it's, I don't know. I don't want to say anyone shouldn't try to make so bad it's good movies, because you know everything's valid. But I'm a little tired of it as like a comedic approach. I think you can try to make funny horror comedies that aren't where the jokes aren't all coming out of we purposely put a boom mic in frame or something.
Right.
Like that's had its day. Instead, just try to do what these movies were doing. Come up with ridiculous concepts and bizarre premises. Get like actual fun puppets and stuff, and just make like a real movie. Yeah. And don't worry, it'll still be cheesy and corny because of what you're working with. But it'll be better.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like go for the more swing for the fences, like over the top approach. I agree with you.
Yeah. Aim high no matter what your budget. That's what these guys were doing.
So I guess we should, a good way to kind of wrap up this discussion is this documentary that I can't remember, when did this come out, like around 2011-ish?
2011, yeah. It's a documentary that we've been referencing a lot. It's called Screaming in High Heels, The Rise and Fall of the Scream Queen Era, and it's directed by Jason Paul Collum.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because really even before you get to like the details of these three, because it is about these three particular ladies, but they kind of give you a nice overview with some of the directors and stuff of like recalling what it was like in the drive-in period really led to like a certain type of like B movie being made. And then like when video came, like kind of like they assert, and I'll be honest, I never really thought of it this way, but it makes a lot of sense in terms of like, you know, video stores kind of, you know, putting access to more movies, whatever. It kind of did take some of the, steal some of the thunder of the drive-ins, wouldn't you say?
Well, it is true. Like, so this documentary, it's interesting because this is a very short documentary. It's just a little over an hour. And I remember being very apprehensive approaching it. Like, I even felt weird renting it for a few bucks. It's like, this is only like an hour. And I feel like it had a lot of potential to just feel like a DVD featurette or fluff piece. I knew it was like a Kickstarter documentary, right? So that's sometimes not a great sign. And it covers, so what you should say, I think it's like a really good documentary. Like, it covers so much in the running time. You get a lot of great info. And it did make me, and as you just said, I had never really thought about that before, but they make a good point about how like kind of every media form that comes along, unfortunately, like kind of kills the previous one. Like, no, I mean, obviously that's obvious. We all know that. But the way they describe how it happens and how you kind of lose something each time, so that like that transition from drive-in to video store, and then video store to cable, and then like cable to DVD, and how they keep showing how the marketplace just keeps shifting in a smaller box like direction each time, right? And it's like sad, but also it's kind of, there's also still a weird level of nostalgia to it though, just because we lived through that. I don't know, it was very interesting.
Yeah, it was. And then like they kind of, you know, set up some of the reasons and like kind of like the business. They kind of, what I think makes the movie very worthwhile viewing. And like we should say, it is short, 64 minutes, but you can rent it for only $1.99 on Amazon Prime Video. And like honestly, like I was just like, well, yeah, it's probably $2 because it's so short, but it's so good. Like even if I would have paid $5 to watch it, I think it would have been worth it, because personally, like for me, it was like one of the most entertaining things I've watched in probably the last 2 or 3 weeks. But like, yeah, they kind of give the background and like why these movies start getting made and how they start getting made. You know, because like the video market was booming, like you sell these, you could put them on cable TV, you know, like they said, like you could cut out the nudity and like get them on something like USA. And it kind of goes one by one. It gives the backgrounds of Michelle Bauer and Linnea Quigley and Brinke Stevens. And like, it's interesting because they think, oh, okay, like these, you know, actresses, whatever, ended up in these B movies. They probably have similar stories, but they all have like kind of like really 3 distinct paths into the business, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I have to give the documentary credit because I definitely learned things I didn't know. Like I never knew that Brinke Stevens, her professional name comes from that she was married to Dave Stevens, the creator of The Rocketeer. That was news to me. Yeah, and like the backstory is interesting, and then seeing where they are now. And there's even parts that are kind of, I found it actually kind of sad when Michelle Bauer talks about how in her everyday life she never tells anybody that she did this whole thing, because like everyone assumes it's just softcore porn, and that like kind of really bummed me out hearing her say that. Yeah. And then just seeing the different relationship that three of them have in more modern times with what they did, you know, and they talked about the thing we just talked about, how like I think all three of them went through a period of not being sure about the term Scream Queen and then kind of reclaiming it later. Yeah, it's all good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. Like I don't want to give too many of the details away, because I actually really would highly encourage, especially people like our listeners, to give this movie a rental. But like, yeah, like it's really good, and like, yeah, like it's kind of like that thing, like. And what's kind of cool is, I mean, unfortunately, you know, they weren't like classic movies like the ones we were talking about, but like they did, you know, since this documentary was even made 10 years ago, like they did come back and kind of reunite for a couple little projects here and there. So
Yeah, in particular, like Dave Dakota has still been trying to like use them a lot, and it's so Dave Dakota and Fred Olen Ray, after these movies we talked about today, obviously kept going for a long time, and they're big figures in the exploitation B movie world throughout the late '80s and '90s. And I will say the one thing that's impressive about them is how they both have adapted to all the changes in the market. So before we started recording, Goat and I were talking about how if you look at them now, both Fred Olen Ray and David Dakota are basically making mostly like Hallmark Christmas movies or Lifetime thrillers, because that's kind of the modern version of exploitation cinema, and that is sad. Like I think it's sad that these two directors who are making such wild movies in the 80s and 90s are now making these, but at least they're still working. And I know Dave Dakota in particular talks in documentary about how he's just happy if he's working. So I feel good for them. But David Dakota, who is gay, he kind of found this like new niche in the 2000s where he started making like a series of kind of like gay themed slashers, exploitation films called like the 1313 films, which were kind of just like he would get a bunch of like handsome guys together and kind of aim for like exploitation of like, you know, men in a sense of having them run around in their underwear and stuff. And he did a few of those where he reunited the three Scream Queens. I think there's actually one called Scream Queens, and they're in it. And it's interesting because there's a part of the documentary, and we've talked about it too, about how when you get older, kind of Hollywood doesn't want you the same way.
Yeah.
And there is like a weird, I don't know, there's almost like an academic paper to be written about the fact that the only way these three can still be presented as Scream Queens, because, you know, you're not going to use them as like the young sexy women anymore, is to put them in a movie aimed at a gay audience, because a gay audience will just celebrate them as like the old, like cool queens they are, right? And not worry about having to have them be sex symbols. And that's kind of sad, but I guess it's still nice that they're working together. And I don't know. Hopefully more like younger directors and stuff will start using them when they can, and you know, kind of maybe they could enjoy that kind of Crampton-esque resurgence.
Yeah, I think that's just really silly in all honesty, like that whole notion of, like you say, like basically, you know, not just these three women in particular, but just actors in general, whether they be men or women, having this silly notion of like basically having an expiration date. Like I think you could, you know, easily write a story about three women of whatever age going away to a cabin for a weekend getaway, and you know, some horrific things happening. And I mean, like, okay, now, like, yeah, like the point that there are at their lives and their careers, like, you're probably not going to do like a 5-minute bathtub scene with them, but like we said, like these women, like they had a lot more to offer than just that. And like, and honestly, like even in the documentary, just seeing them talk on camera, like they captivate you, they fascinate you, you know, like just hearing about their normal everyday lives. So it's like, I don't know, like if I had the money to afford all three of them to like really be in a movie and not be like just one day cameos, but if I could really like have the money to like write a movie about all three of them, you know, incorporate them, like I would do it, because I think it would actually be legitimately good, because I like 100% I think all three of them are good actresses. So yeah, but it is a little sad. But yeah, I recommend every movie that we talked about today, including the documentary, highly.
And I also recommend for the listeners, if you end up watching Screaming in High Heels, I highly recommend watching it with a piece of paper and a pen in front of you, because they show clips of tons of movies, including a bunch I'd never heard of. And that's the thing, as I said, these women made so many movies. There were so many I was like, oh, I got to track that down now. And I actually have sitting in front of me right now a list of about over 20 titles I wrote down from that documentary, where I'm like, whoop, I got to find these. And luckily we are in an era where, you alluded to this earlier, but we're in an era where companies like Severin and Vinegar Syndrome and companies are starting to like track these movies down and put out nice Blu-rays. So there's a Nightmare Sisters has a Vinegar Syndrome Blue. As we said, 88 Films. Good. If you have a region-free player, you can get some of these. So hopefully more of these movies will get more of these early Scream Queen stuff will get put out now.
Yeah, and like I mean, I would think, like right now where we're at is probably the sweet spot for these movies being re-released, because you have people, our age that we are at now who grew up with these things and are willing to give these things a second or third look. So yeah, like this is a really nice time. Even the documentary, even though it was from 10 years ago, I think it's Fred Olen Ray was talking about, there's certain things that were considered not cool 20 years ago that people are into now, and they're like kind of a cool hipster way, and like it's like, yeah, this is kind of like one of those things, Yeah, I mean, these boutique labels are building their name and their whole like ethos off of that, right? The fact of like treating these movies that people just dismissed as trash back then as like undiscovered classics now, and kind of like
it's the last remaining market of like physical media is just the collectors who are willing to who love when a movie like Nightmare Sisters is treated like something worth valuing and putting special features on and giving a nice transfer to. So
exactly. So yeah, so I'm just like you after doing this. Like I thought I would, kind of have my fill, so to speak, after watching 3 films and a documentary in the last week. But it's kind of actually quite the opposite. I'm kind of like I'm kind of on the hunt for more of these titles and seeing where they're at and where I can catch them at. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I mean that was just a really really great experience sitting down to watch these and everything. So definitely got to give credit to you, Trev, for this was kind of like your brainstorm here to do an episode on this, and I highly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
for doing it, because I was definitely looking forward to it too. I never need an excuse to sit down and watch these women, but it was nice to revisit it. As I said, now it's got me. Spent the last, like yesterday, I watched so much USA Up All Night on YouTube. So obviously not the movies, but just like the Rhonda Shear segments, which are fun in their own right for the same reason. Rhonda Shear is very much like these women, right, where she's just got this like fun, goofy personality, and just to look back at that era of TV. I mean, Joe Bob's still kicking, but I miss the horror hosts and everything.
Exactly.
And,
I loved Rhonda Shear so much as a kid, and I didn't get to watch her that much, but that was one of the things whenever I would stay over at my uncle and aunt's house and stuff. Like I would always stay up late at night in the basement watching a lot of Up All Night. Mm-hmm. And I
remember being so nerdy of being like when they would do these special episodes every once in a while where Gilbert Gottfried and Rhonda Shear were together and actually thinking that was like a big deal.
Yeah, right. Meanwhile, these are just two people who like, you know what I mean? They have the bare minimum of entertainment careers. But yeah, she was great. And I just like, she was like, it was kind of interesting because she was like a host, but she was like a bombshell into her own right. And like what I really liked her, like that was the time, and I'm sure you were the same way, Trev. Like that was the time where like you probably thought Elvira was like the hottest woman in the world. And then like Rhonda,
I mean, that's never changed.
Yeah, no, it's never changed. But then like kind of Rhonda Shear came along like a little bit in the same vein, but completely different. Like, you know, she didn't have an Elvira shtick. Like Rhonda Shear was Rhonda Shear. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was cool. But yeah, so listeners, I know this is kind of a XL long episode, but I hope this episode really attracts a lot of the fans of the Scream Queen genre. And I want to say thank you, everybody, for the last couple months. Our downloads have been up, almost at a all-time high level, so I really appreciate that. And Trev, obviously, I always appreciate you stopping by. And we need to really talk about what's going on over at the Failure to Franchise, because you guys have been coming in hot with some recent episodes.
Yeah, Failure to Franchise, my show dedicated to failed franchise starters, movies that were meant to start Hollywood franchises that never really took off. It's been going well. We found a nice trajectory. We seem to be growing every episode. So I don't know exactly when this is dropping, but in like the weeks ahead, we've got a lot of themed months coming up. We're going to do like a month where we look at 2 different King Arthur movies. And I guess I'll just drop it here because whatever. Leading into our big summer event, Mela Junevovich, where throughout May and June we're going to be looking at failed franchise starters featuring Mila Jovovich. So some good stuff coming up in the months ahead.
Yeah, we're like, I guess it's okay to say that we're recording this in almost February, but really late January. But like we got a lot of episodes in the can, so this one should be dropping in March. So
okay.
Yeah. So everybody get primed. So when you guys hear this, there will be. But I gotta say, like, I mean, all the episodes are great. Are Failure to Franchise. But my 2 favorite recently, I love Battleship, and you guys kind of tore my heart out a little bit. But I highly enjoyed hearing you guys dissect Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone.
Mm-hmm. I know, because you're in that camp of you like that more than Dredd, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think we talked in the episode. I think we were fair about why someone might if you're not as attached to the comic, But yeah, I mean, I will say I bought Judge Dredd on DVD for that episode. I bought it at like a video store for a few bucks, and it's actually one that I like having on my shelf because I think I say in the episode that I like quite a bit of it until a certain point. I think it starts really well. And I think production design wise, it's great. But
dude, I was all about it. The whole world building accent, I can't talk right now, but the whole world building of it. And like, I actually went out and like, I have it somewhere in a box, but I bought one of those like giant thick, like making of art of Judge Dredd books. Like, like not only did I see the movie, but I literally bought like a $25 book about the making of it. You know what I mean? Like,
I think if you could take like the look of Judge Dredd and transport it over onto the story and performances of Dredd, you'd basically have like the movie everyone wants from that character.
Like exactly, like I guess I'm a pretty big Sylvester Stallone fan, but I don't count Judge Dredd as being like one of his good characters. And like, in like I mean, I just love everything Diane Lane does. Like, I really can't even think of a movie that Diane Lane was in that I thought she sucked. You know what I mean?
Oh no.
So like, I love her, Judge Hershey. I kind of love Armand Assante.
I do. Asante's great in that. Yeah.
I love the robot. I love the cannibals. Like you said, like, I get why Judge Dredd purists wouldn't like it, but from a design standpoint, and like, yeah, like if they would have dropped Carl Urban into the middle of the Stallone Judge Dredd like universe, like, I would have loved it. But it's just, the Dredd, the Carl Urban one is good. I like it. I went to see it. I own the little 3D Blu-ray, everything. But it's like, yeah, like, if we could ever get a franchise of Judge Dredd that like really had that whole built out world of it, like the way the Stallone did, like, I would be happy.
Now, I got to ask, because you said it's your other favorite episode, Chris and I don't often disagree, but one of our disagreements was Battleship. Where you fall on Battleship? Because I quite like it, and Chris wasn't very impressed with it. But how do you feel about it?
Well, I was dissing Battleship this is how much I was not about Battleship, Trev. So, okay. Like, going back to the old Hillbilly DVD Reviews day, it was one of the original episodes of State of the Multiplex, and it was that month where I made fun of nothing but alien invasion movies coming out. So I was like, totally fuck this movie. And then like, when it was out, like, I was on vacation with my mom. We took a little trip up the coast, and like, we wanted to see a movie, and I went to a theater, and there was like Men in Black 3, Battleship, and a couple other movies playing. And I was just like, we just left. I was like, I don't want to see any of these. So like, I like literally on vacation passed up a chance to see Battleship, and I wish I never would have, because like, whatever it was that Christmas or whenever it came out, like, my dad bought it for me just because it came out in a cool steelbook. So I was like, whatever, like, I have it now, like, I'll watch it. I watched it. I probably watched Battleship, no kidding, like 4 or 5 times in the last whatever it's been.
So you
10
came
years.
around to my side. So you're with
me. Dude, like. Yeah. It does have that stink, which I'm a Peter Berg fan. And by the way, I just gotta let it be known, Trev, you ripped my heart out, dude, when you totally slapped to the side Peter Berg's The Kingdom. Like, oh, I love that movie. I love that movie. But anyway, like, yeah, like, it does have the terribleness and the shoehorned Rihanna, and then like, you have Liam Neeson version, and Brooklyn Decker. But like, to me, I don't know if it was just because I was a fan of the video games or what, but to me, Battleship it's not even a Transformers ripoff, which it kind of is. To me, it's a Halo ripoff. So you just have the military versus this like invading
a bunch of
Master
force. Chiefs.
Yeah. So yeah, and not only that, but it has been a while since I watched it. Not too long, but maybe like 5 years since I watched Battleship. But when I listened to your guys' episode, I actually just listened to it last week. I was a little behind. Like yeah, I've been watching a lot of stuff for episodes. I've been recording a lot of episodes lately. But kind of once I get through my backlog of stuff I'm watching for episodes, podcast episodes, I'm going to watch Battleship really soon.
Right. Well, then my work is done here.
Your work is done. And then obviously, what's going on over in the neck of the woods of the X-Men, the Days of Future podcast?
Days of Future podcast has been going well as well. So for the people who listen regularly to that, my X-Men podcast might know that for a long time, that show's been going for quite a while now. And for a long time, my co-host Joe was kind of catching up on the X-Men books. But last year they did like a big relaunch of all the titles under Jonathan Hickman, and kind of are doing this new era of X-Men books. And Joe just decided to kind of jump ahead and actually be current. So for the first time in a long time, Joe and I are reading the current books. And that's allowed us to kind of have the newer episodes be more about what's actually going on right now. And there's some interesting stuff happening in the books, and we get to hit on that every once in a while. So we've talked about the recent giant crossover they did, Ten of Swords, and anytime a big new story drops. But other than that, we're just kind of waiting to hear that first. I assume soon we'll start to see that first X-Men MCU news trickling in, and we can go back to talking about the movie stuff a little bit more, because right now, obviously we covered New Mutants, and we're kind of just done with it for now. So we're kind of trying to fill in the gap by watching some older stuff. The Netflix has put up the old X-Men anime shows, and we've been diving into those, and we might dive into some of the older crossovers from the comics. So yeah, just keep your ears out for when we finally get some MCU news.
Yeah, I have to say that has me a little bit nervous. Like I feel like X-Men into the MCU, just because the MCU is so mature at this point. Like I don't know how you can introduce the mutant concept when you've already gone so far in so many other directions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the challenge that is in front of them, and I'm sure that's hopefully it's a challenge they're taking seriously, but I'm sure it's one they're finding frustrating as they're trying to figure it out. I think they have a benefit now with getting into the multiverse stuff to maybe use that to their advantage a little bit, but I don't envy them trying to figure that out, because I agree that it's going to be weird to just suddenly say like, oh, and now there's mutants. You got to come up with something more clever than that. So we'll see.
Yeah. And maybe this is good news. Maybe this is news you don't care about, Trev. But I haven't viewed the film yet in its entirety. But I have officially ended my Logan boycott. I always had a desire to see the black and white version of the film. I didn't realize that version of the film is out of print. So I paid quite very handsomely we're talking above Scream Factory levels here to import.
Jeez.
To import a. I'll just say I paid $35 to import a black and white 4K copy of Logan from the UK.
Man,
so
couldn't you just got the regular version and mess with the contrast on your TV?
I've tried that, and I'm also a proud owner of the Fury Road Black and Chrome edition.
Well, that's the thing. I never understand that, because those movies weren't filmed to be in black and white. Right. So ultimately, that's all they're doing, right? Is they're just taking the contrast out. It's I don't know. That's why I never care about those versions.
Yeah,
but.
I mean they do tweak it, but I gotta say, they do tweak it beyond more than just literally just turning off the color like it does, and it I don't know. I'm a fan of it, dude. I wish they did it with more movies, in all honesty.
Of the two, Logan makes more sense to me, because at least Logan has a noir sensibility to it. I don't understand wanting to see Fury Road in black and white at all. I don't understand seeing any Mad Max movie in black and white, but whatever. Just not for me, I guess.
Yeah, dude, I am such a sucker. I bought Fury Road so many times. And as you know, I'm not even that big of a fan of the movie. So I bought the 3D version, which was quite pricey. And then, I kept waiting for because they really milked it. They released all the editions separately and stuff. And then, the black and chrome edition, I eventually had a full price. So for my little combination of Fury Road editions, I probably paid $50, and now I had to pay $35 to get Logan from the UK and wait 2 months with no tracking, wondering if it ever showed up. Thankfully, it showed up. But I gotta tell you, dude, I did some A and B comparisons between the 4K of the color version of Logan and the black and white, or as they call it, the Noir version of Logan. Dude, the Logan one, as much as I like the black and white Fury Road, and I also enjoyed the black and white version of The Mist, to me, it's just, there's a starkness to it. It feels like it fits the movie so much better. The little scenes of, when he wakes up and they do, the shot of, the glass of water next to it. Just, little shots. They seem so much more, important and epic and stuff, and it, to me at least, and again, I haven't seen the full movie, so I don't know the full feel of the whole storyline and stuff, but for that stark western look they were kind of going for in Logan, I think it looks so good. I'll so definitely
you waiting for that black and white noir Blu-ray of Carrot Top's chairman of the board?
Oh, dude, that would be so tight. The part where he walks in and the board, they're all in uproar, and he has the surfboard under his arm. Oh my god, dude, the fuck. No, dude, I just love that kind of gritty, pushed contrast black and white. Another movie that I thought was amazing visually was remember Nebraska a couple years ago with Bruce Banner? Oh yeah, I love that look.
I do really. I mean, I'm glad more people are returning to it. I thought The Lighthouse was beautiful. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not opposed to black and white. I just sometimes don't understand when they, like you said, when they do that post kind of black and white conversion. But
yeah. I mean, I don't know.
It makes you feel better. You said you're a sucker, but I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm about to plunk down a bunch of money again to buy Dawn of the Dead again. I'm going to get that new Second Sight set of it, and that's I bought the gigantic Elite CAV Laserdisc of it back in the day. And I bought the big, which I still have because I have that signed by Tom Savini. And then I have that big Ultimate Edition from Anchor Bay, which I thought I would never have to replace, but now I find myself wanting to get the second sight one. So
yeah, I've been existing all this time off the Anchor Bay big box set, and I had the original Blu-ray that came out, which I always thought looked nice. But yeah, like I will plunk down for the new whatever. Like I didn't really go in on the previous version that they did. But like the more stripped down version, it's at a more affordable price. So yeah, I'll do it. So I mean, that's pretty much it. This was an epic episode. I appreciate all you listeners for hanging in there with us. And again, Trev, thank you for bringing the topic to the table.
Yeah, no problem. Now for the first time in a while, we don't have anything planned. So
exactly.
Got to figure something out. But
at least we'll figure out what our next move is. But anyway, everybody, thanks again for joining us. And we'll catch you here again real soon, talking about more classic flicks in the movie graveyard.